City Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson. Alderman Ruth Simmons. Alderman Suffredin. Alderman Ravel. Alderman Rainey. Alderman Fleming. We have a quorum.
All right, terrific. Thank you, City Clerk, and welcome everybody to the Monday, October 22nd, 2018 Evanston City Council meeting. Tonight's meeting will predominantly be spent on our city budget. The city budget reflects the values that a community have, and I think everybody is well aware that we have a $7.5 million projected budget that we have to close. There's only a couple ways to close a budget. You either cut expenses, you increase revenues, or you do a combination of the two. This is the beginning of that process. This will last for about a month. This is our first meeting since the city manager has released his proposed budget, and we're going to have a thorough conversation about that budget tonight, and the council members up here and myself and others will listen to the community and your thoughts on the budget. But as I said, at the end of the day, we're going to have to make some tough decisions, and sacrifices are going to have to be made across many areas of the city government. Two announcements today. One is we met in executive session on October 15th, 2018 to complete the annual review of our city manager, Wally Bobkowitz. This evaluation marked the completion of 9 years of service for Mr. Bobkowitz. You think I know your name, Wally, as Evanston City Manager, making him the second longest serving city manager in our city's history. The majority of the City Council and I found that the City Manager exceeded expectations this year. The City Manager's composite score met or exceeded expectations in each of 9 categories he was evaluated, although his scores this year were moderately less than last year. Mr. Bobkowitz received general praise during his evaluation for his leadership in strategic planning and operations and delivery of city services, resulting in several successful citywide infrastructure improvements: Chicago Avenue, Sheridan Road, James Park, Fleetwood-Jourdain, Chandler-Newberger improvements, the hiring and promotion of a talented, hardworking, and diverse leadership team, important interagency agreements, additional water sales to the village of Lincolnwood, and improvements to policing procedures, including alternatives to arrest. Prior to the evaluation, the city manager requested that the city council and I not consider him for any salary adjustment. Therefore, there are no changes to his current contract dated October 13th, 2016. The city council and I, Wally, value and appreciate your service to the residents of this city and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you. The second announcement is a proclamation that Alderman Wilson is going to give in my absence later this week to the Rotary. And it's going to be given to the Rotary Club of Evanston and Rotary Club of Evanston Lighthouse. We are very, very fortunate in this community to actually be the home of, Rotary International right here downtown, and their focus on eliminating polio is truly extraordinary, and it was an audacious goal, and they have already dropped since 1988 the cases of polio by 99.9%. So it really is just a matter of years before they have eradicated polio from the world, and that's pretty impressive. And it's pretty impressive that they're right here in downtown Evanston. So thank you, Alderman Wilson, for giving that later this week. I'd like to turn it over now to the city manager for any public public announcements.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Lawrence Hemingway, our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, is here with a presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, City Manager Bobkowitz, Lawrence Hemingway, Director of Parks and Rec. Tonight I'm honored to introduce a volunteer group to you that we're very excited to do so. 2 weeks ago when I did my end of the summer review, one of my slides I mentioned to you was about this exciting volunteer group, but I don't want to take all of the thunder. I'm going to bring up the manager of the Fleetwood-Jourdain Community Center, Mr. Ken Cherry, to introduce these wonderful volunteers.
Thank you, Mr. Hemingway. Mr. Mayor, City Manager, Clerk, and to the entire council, good evening. we at Fleetwood-Jourdain do a variety of food programs. In the summer, we have our snack program and our lunch program. In the fall, winter, and spring, we have a snack program and a supper program. Particularly in the fall, winter, and spring, that supper program serves hot meals to the neighborhood children, serves hot meals to our program as well as other programs surrounding our center, and just walk-ins, and they get a hot meal, a hot supper. This program, this volunteer group highlighted our programs and decided to raise money to help support our program. They have this goal that they are going to try to feed children one cartwheel at a time. The name of the group is Cartwheel for Kids, and they, through their hard work, have donated to our food programs $7,400. And so tonight we are so grateful to have 3 of the 6 young ladies who actually do the work. They're busy. They don't just do this fundraising stuff. They are in school and doing other things. So we have 3 of the 6 that could make it tonight to come and be honored by us and to give us this chance to show them how much we appreciate the work that they've done for our program. Thank you.
Always up for accepting checks. All right.
Let me move it.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Hemingway, one quick question. So explain the cartwheel part.
The cartwheels?
Do they cartwheel?
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. So the young ladies do a variety of activities, and do they do cartwheels? Absolutely. So they get together and they set up various activities. These activities could be, shooting baskets. They could be trying to hit a ball into a hockey rink. They're just various activities, and of course, they do as many cartwheels. They take pledges for these various activities, and that's how they were able to collect the $7,400. All right, thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Wally. City Clerk, it looks like something's going on outside. You have any announcements for everyone?
Yes, today was the first day of early voting here at the Evanston Civic Center. And Evanston saw 609 voters come out today. That puts us in, I believe, 3rd place throughout the county. So we need to get those numbers up and continue to have folks come out and early vote. Early voting goes until November 5th. This week, early voting is until 5 p.m. every day. Next week, early voting will go until 7 p.m. We also have Saturday and Sunday early voting. There are plenty of opportunities to volunteer with the clerk's office. We'll be going door to door in low voter turnout precincts, particularly in the 5th, 2nd, and 8th Ward. There will also be opportunities to do phone calls and join our text messaging campaign to get voters out in the upcoming election. Those are all of my announcements.
Excellent. Thank you, Clerk Reed. Okay, we're going to move on now to public comment. We have 50 people that have signed up for public comment tonight. As everyone knows, our rules are that we set aside 45 minutes for public comment. Tonight, I'm going to stretch it just a hair and allow everyone 1 minute at the podium when you come up. As always, ask that you be concise, and if it's been said before, it's okay to say, hey, somebody else has already raised the point that I wanted to raise. But we look forward to everyone's comments. Again, I know lots of people are here to talk about the budget, and that's important to everybody up here, so we're looking forward to your comments. I we'll keep time up here, and I'm going to give you a little nudge when you get 10 more seconds left, so you can wrap it up, and we'll go from there. So I'll name off the speakers in groups of 3, and if you could just line up so we can try and get through this quickly. We've got Marie Larson, Donald Ziegler, and then Janad Rizki. So welcome, Marie.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Mary Larson. I'm a resident of the 9th Ward, and I'm the coordinator of health services in School District 65. As the coordinator of health services, I take issue with the city manager's statement that jeopardizing Evanston's Health and Human Services Department classification as a health department is something that the city could contend with. This is an erroneous perception and an irresponsible claim. Our health department is an apolitical entity that is governed by best practices of the Illinois Association of Public Health Administrators, Illinois Association of Board of Health, Illinois Department of Public Health, and the University of Illinois School of Public Health. Their sole mission is to protect the health and safety of all the people who live and work in Evanston. Not only do they give us guidance on best practices for air quality, food sanitation, and food safety, direction on environmental health hazards and communicable disease protection, they provide us with strategies and tactics to protect and improve our community of well-being. They are as necessary as police, firefighters, and medical personnel to respond to emergencies and protect community health and safety. They are an essential and cost-effective public investment.
Thank you.
And if I could...
Sure. Yep. You can give it to the city clerk. That'd be great. Next speaker is Donald Ziegler, then Janad Rizki, then Lynn Gettleman Chabahab. I apologize up front if I'm
Mayor, members of the council, and city manager, I'm Don Ziegler. I'm chair of the Evanston Health Advisory Council, and I'm also on the faculty of School of Public Health at UIC. I'm concerned about the financial pressures of the city, but I'm particularly concerned about the choices to drastically make cuts in the health department. Well, 5 cuts are proposed. 3 of them, the assistant director, communicable disease specialist, and health educator, would effectively end the health department's effectiveness and certainly its certification status. The loss of certification threatens our ability to receive hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal and state programs that have been used for lead poisoning prevention, tobacco control, emergency preparedness, etc. It should be noted that if we didn't have this status in 2009 during the H1N1 pandemic, we wouldn't have been able to have the influenza vaccinations.
About 10 more seconds.
Our health department is also a leader in fighting chronic diseases, and we've been a leader on tobacco control and nationally recognized for that, and also our campaigns on obesity. We urge you to keep the assistant director, communicable disease specialist, and health educator. And also, you all received a letter from Catherine Kennard, who is the head of the health department in Skokie and also a resident of Evanston. And we're entering in, I want to enter into the record her document too. So please make the right decisions to protect and protect. Health is essential for the sustainable development of any community, and we don't want that to be prejudiced at all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Don. You can bring that up here to the clerk. All right, we have Janad Rizki, then Lynn Gettleman Chahab, and then Birch Burghart.
The city of Evanston is bankrupt. The real tax increase is close to 30 to 50%, which amounts to a 10% property tax increase. This doesn't end with this year's budget. You basically, the answer for all this is pure waste, mismanagement, corruption, and giving our money to special interest. We stand with $7 million in lawsuits that basically would fill the budget hole. We have all the waste on Howard Street, and we have Alderman Rainey suggesting she supports police and fire. Yet Mr. Bobkowitz is we're laying them off as of last year by not filling the positions. Nobody in the community knew about it, frankly. And we have millions of dollars of screw-ups here. And we have Robert Ripoff. And the reason I'm going to call it Robert Ripoff is because we went ahead and did a project with not knowing how we were going to pay for it. Okay? You basically are paying $1 million in debt service. Next year in 2020, you got $2 million coming. So what's going to happen? You have more problems here. More employees are getting laid off. And certain city council members think they're going to save this with economic development. They're not. If it'd take 15 high-rises just to come up with Robert Crown. And the water bill department is a huge mess. And Harley Clark's a diversion. And our city manager, we shut down the last council meeting. He went on a junket to the ICMA conference.
10 more seconds.
All right. And finally, I challenge you, Mayor Haggerty, Mr. Bobkowitz, and the senior council members to meet with me in a public forum to discuss what's really going on here. Anyone in the room can have this. Take my email. You'll learn more, because this is a lot of nonsense.
Thank you. Lynn is next, then Birch, and then Paul Barker.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lynn Gettleman-Shahab. I'm a Evanston resident, and I'm a North Shore pediatrician, and I work at the Evanston High School Health Center, and I'm also co-chair of the Obesity Action Team here at the Health Department. I'm also here to make a plea not to get rid of the health educator, the assistant health director, or the communicable disease surveillance specialist, because without them, we do not have a health department. We will lose our state certification, and we will lose $800,000 of federal, state, and private grant money that goes with that certification. We already know in the past 10 years that Evanston has had swine flu. We've had E. coli on our beach waters. We've had lead in some of our public building waters. We have had outbreaks in our food, in our restaurants. And we know that we have travelers here, residents and people who pass through that have been documented travelers to countries with documented outbreaks of Zika and Ebola virus. We also have, a significant portion of our population who are obese, who smoke, and who don't exercise. Without these positions, especially the health educator, we also lose programs like Rethink Your Drink, Smoke Free Illinois, We're Out Walking, and the city employee wellness program for over 100 people, and again, all the thousands of dollars of grant money that come with them. There's a lot of talk in this town about equity and collective impact. The health department is a backbone that brings all of these major organizations in Evanston together, encourages communication between them, and looks for gaps in services. And an example of things brought to us by the health department, the Evanston High School Health Center, where I work, and Erie Family Health Center, which is now the largest federally qualified health center in the entire country, was brought due in partnerships with the Evanston Health Department. So again, I just want to say that these positions seem to pay for more than themselves with the thousands and thousands of dollars of grant money that come with them, and the thousands of unpaid intern hours that also come with them.
I need to wrap it up, Lynn.
Okay, and just without them, we'll pay a big price.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to try. Come on up, Birch, and we're going to try something else just to help people with the time and know when you've hit your minute. We're actually going to set a timer, and it'll go off. And then if it goes off and you haven't finished, wrap it up in 10 seconds. That would be great. Thank you. I just want to make sure we get to everybody and we're fair to everybody.
No.
Yes.
I understand.
Yes.
I tend to be.
Welcome.
Thank you. I tend to be brief. Anyway, I'm Birch Burghardt, Board President of Interfaith Action of Evanston and resident of the 4th Ward. With me are delegates of Interfaith Action, clergy, and members of our advocacy team. We are here together because we are one voice. That saves you a few extra speakers. First of all, thanks for including so many voices in this budgeting process. We appreciate it. The expected deficit has been a real challenge to deal with and requires difficult choices. And so we're glad you've included us. Interfaith Action has been focused on bringing comfort and safety to people with the most serious challenges in Evanston, some of the people with the most serious challenges.
You're at your 1 minute, yes.
What stood out for us in the proposed budget for 2019 was the cut by a third in funding of Evanston's Mental Health Board, whose efforts are especially important for the homeless folks that we work with. We hope that you'll decide against making those proposed cuts, which we think will hurt some very vulnerable people in our community.
Okay. Turn that.
I sent you all a letter yesterday, and a shorter letter that was written before the proposed budget was published has been circulating among some of our faith communities, so that people can just voice their support of the poor in our community. And
Got to wrap it up in 10 seconds here.
okay,
Rich.
can do it. Here we go. About 400 signatures from more than 13 different faith communities.
Thank you. You can bring those up to the clerk. Thank you, everyone, for standing up there, too. All right. Next up, we've got Paul Barker, then Alice Berry, then Dale Griffin.
Submit them, but this is...
We're working on different sounds, apparently, up here. Okay. City Clerk, why don't you do the time on this? Paul, welcome.
Thank you. Paul Barker, 9th Ward. I don't personally know the city manager, but this is not the first time that I've felt suspicious of his motives and worried about the power of this unelected official. The ill-conceived restructuring of the Youth and Young Adult Division makes no sense. It appears to be intended to subvert the effectiveness of a successful program. That makes me suspicious. The attitude behind the proposal seems to be, if it ain't broke, let's break it. We have a rare thing here, a good, effective program run by good, effective people. All you have to do is leave it alone. Can I cede my remaining seconds to Oliver Ruff?
Is he on the agenda today?
He is.
Are you, Oliver? Okay. When you come up, I'll give you a couple extra seconds. You got it, Paul. Okay. Alice, welcome. Then we've got Dale Griffin, then Joey Roger.
Alice Berry, 1630 Main Street, 9th Ward. For the second time this year, the city manager's office has launched an assault on the crucial work of the Youth and Young Adult Division. This assault is called a reorganization, which is what one does when something isn't working well. Is that the case here? No, the city manager admits as much. He calls this a promotion. So that's how you promote a successful leader. You move him to another department while paying him so little respect that you don't even talk to him first about the impact it will have. We are in a serious financial crisis, and there isn't even a stated economic reason for this change. What's really going on here? To me, it looks like what Dr. Peggy McIntosh calls white control. That's when white people say to black people, "We've let you come this far, and we're going to stop you here because we can." Council, support the division unaltered, and if the city manager is this incompetent or this racist, fire him. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Dale Griffin, Joey Roger, then Oliver Ruff.
Good evening. Dale Griffin, member Unitarian Church of Evanston, 9th Ward resident, and I work on the board of a Unitarian Universalist Prison Ministry of Illinois. I'm here to ask you also to keep the Evanston Youth and Young Adult Outreach Division intact as a matter of public health and safety. We've met with Mr. Brown and about issues of employment opportunities for people coming out of prison and for help to be helpful to people coming home from prison. In the last week, he and two of his staff, Nathan Norman, Stacy Marangi, were a panel on reentry issues and help needed. There's clearly strong respect among those three and a strong mentor relationship with Kevin Brown. It would be a shame to split that apart. This work is an investment in the vibrancy, health, and safety of the entire Evanston community. This is where we can make a real difference in people's lives and prevent violence in the future. It's a small investment now. Please keep this division intact with its leader and staff. There's no short-term savings and possible long-term loss. Splitting up would help hurt the community. Finally, the process of arriving at the plan seems to be without the participation, the buy-in of the people doing the work. I ask you to reject the proposal because it won't save time and will not improve the health and safety of the community in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. All right. Next up, we've got Joey Roger, then Oliver Ruff, then DeKalb Fonda.
Good evening. I'm Joey Roger. I live on Hinman, and I'm a person who lives in the First Ward. I work, as some of you know, as a chaplain for our police department. I am speaking for myself tonight, not for the police department, not for the chaplain team. The invitation comes from the prophet Isaiah, calling across the years, comfort ye, my people, says the Lord. Bad things happen to good people in this most livable city. Sometimes people die, sometimes by suicide, sometimes violently in the hand of another, sometimes suddenly, sometimes alone, unmissed by others for days and days. Sometimes they're just afraid. Bad things happen. I've come to know that when such things happen, families need two things: compassion and information. For years, the Evanston Police Department has had social workers known as the Victim Services Staff. These positions are on the grid or on the chopping block to be eliminated. I don't think we're the kind of city that wants to let people for whom tragic things happen have to do it on their own. We still have the invitation, perhaps even the commandment, comfort ye, my people, says the Lord. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. All right. We've got Oliver Ruff, DeKalb Fonda, and then Jessica Sales.
Good
I'm going to give you
evening.
a couple extra seconds there if that buzzer goes off.
Thank you.
All right.
I would like to echo a few comments made by the Roundtable's opinion column. We find many disturbing things in the city manager's proposed budget for the coming fiscal year. In a survey earlier this year, the community ranked 10 programs that we wish to preserve, yet many of these are on the chopping block. What was the purpose of the survey? Was it already predetermined? This budget seems to reflect disdain. As it stands, we believe that the budget is unacceptable. Splitting up the youth and young adult programs division is outrageous to me. If it ain't broke, why do we attempt to fix it? The Youth and Young Adult Service Department ranks second highest in the list of 50 programs, city programs on the survey. Shouldn't that speak volumes for its value? Another very important concern among many is the removal of the communicable disease surveillance specialist, of which will totally dismantle and disqualify the city of Evanston from being a state-certified health department. Without certification, there will be no health department. Look at these two very closely as you reevaluate your reductions. Thank you. And I kept it within that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. All right. We've got DeKalb, then Jessica Sales, then maybe it's Mary Rosinski, although it says Marie, but I think it's Mary.
DeKalb Fonda, resident of the Second Ward for 38 years. My partner and I chose Evanston in 1980 as a place to raise our interracial family, and in many ways it has exceeded our expectations. But many of the proposed cuts to this budget do not reflect the values of a city that brought us here and keep us here. There are many troubling decisions you're being asked to make here that will, if implemented, balance your budget on the backs of women, children, people of color, and the most marginalized in our community. And I'm referring to all the cuts, many of the cuts that people have referred to already, so I won't go into those specifically. But I want to point out two red flags that spoke to me when I reviewed the budget. First was the elimination of the communicable disease specialist from the health department, which I understand will disqualify our city's health department from being certified by the state, by the Illinois Department of Public Health. Second, the proposal to reorganize the youth and young adult program by moving its current director, who built this program, into a workforce development position and shifting his team to a community center under a new administrator. These two proposals, whether conscious, intentional, or not, have the potential to ultimately result in the dismantling of our entire health department and a highly successful youth program. There are programs that have proven their worth to our community. I deeply hope that you will use a much clearer equity lens on all these programs as you make your difficult decisions about what to eliminate and change. Because to me, this proposed budget in many ways reflects what's happening nationally in our country right now. Let's not let it happen in Evanston.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, DeKel. We got Jessica Sales and Mary Rosinski, then Joshua Hall.
Good evening, Jessica Sales, 9th Ward mental health professional. Like so many tonight, I'm here to speak out against the cuts to the mental health board and the impact that will have for so many of our at-risk and vulnerable population. I just have one question, and that is, when we're looking at this budget, if we can put ourselves in the shoes of the people that this is going to affect the most. So I'm talking about our homeless neighbours who are facing another cold winter, our children of colour that are thriving in after-school programs, our seniors who face food insecurity, and so many more. Now, I want this budget to show that we are a place, that we are a town, that we wrap around, we love people, we welcome people, we support people, we hear people, and we stand up for people. And I'm really worried that that budget doesn't send the message. I think it sends the message that, hey, you're on your own. Hey, I can't see you. I can't see your needs or your challenges, and I'm not standing with you. And I think as Evanston, we are so much better than that. And we have a really great opportunity to change this budget and keep supporting the people who need it the most. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. Mary Rosinski, Joshua Hall, then Mark Schroeder.
Hi, Mary Rosinski. I want to echo everything that everyone said about the previous issues, especially with like the Kevin Brown program. I think when we get a good program, we should keep it and make it stronger, not divide it up and make it weaker. I'm here tonight specifically to talk about the MOU with Harley Clerk. I'm concerned as a budget issue that going forward with that MOU will cause a bigger deficit for us because it's an underfunded program. There's experts that have that, all the expenses that were not included in the MOU, and then to talk about regrading the property, and then someone else is saying we'll do a visioning property process for a new park ground. Sounds like more taxpayer dollar. So what appears to be a gift to the city is really kind of a Trojan horse that is going to leave us with a bill, because they said from the beginning, they talked about deconstruction, which is actually a responsible way to bring down a building, and now they've gone to demolition, which is an environmentally destructive way to bring down a building, and they are not going to be restoring the Jensen Gardens according to their new proposal, and what Ms. Simmons had said, no cost to the city. So I just want to bring that up. It is not to compete. Harley Clark is not a budget issue.
Thank you, Mary. Next up, Joshua Hall, then Mark Schroeder, then Michael Neighbors.
I'm a product of Evanston Township High School, product of the Evanston Youth Council appointed by the former mayor, Elizabeth Tisdale, product of Speech Team, product of Relay for Life, American Cancer Society, Youth Technology Corps, Student Council, YOU, Reading Club, Evanston Township High School chapter of the NAACP, and yes, even Shakespeare. Receiving the Chessman of the North Shore Community Service due to my community service hours. This has enabled me to enact change in my community. At District 65, 202, City Hall, right in this room, Northwestern during the Trayvon Martin case, I participated in rallies, spoke on equality, academia, housing, and funding, issues that affect my community. And yes, I only graduated from high school only a few years ago. The predecessors and ancestors of my past have shown me that only a life of service is a life worthwhile. And while speaking to the former and late Lorraine H. Morton after the ceremony of my community service award at the Chessman of the North Shore has shown me that those that invested in me, those have seen something in myself when I couldn't see myself, show me that they invest in me because of the work to be done, not has been done. I've been a product of these services, of the young adult. I only turned 25. Made the decision so others that come under me, the future generation, will have better opportunities and give more than me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. We got Mark Schroeder, then Michael Neighbors, then Terry McHugh.
Mayor Haggerty and members of the City Council, my name is Mark Schroeder. I'm the Manager of Community Relations for North Shore University Health System and Evanston Hospital. Our Evanston Hospital President, Doug Silverstein, could not be here tonight and asked me to read the following statement. The City of Evanston is fortunate to have access to great health care for its citizens with 2 hospitals, the Erie Evanston Skokie Health Center, and a certified public health department. Many of the services and programs provided by the Evanston Health Department are intended to keep Evanston residents healthy. Evanston Hospital maintains an excellent and ongoing relationship with the department, including program partnerships and sponsorships such as Rethink Your Drink, the Erie Skokie Evanston Health Center, and the Evanston Township High School Health Clinic. We recognize that there are difficult decisions that need to be made and believe that the health of the community and its residents should remain a priority. Therefore, we urge the City Council to ensure the important functions provided by the Health Department still are available to Evanston residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Reverend Neighbors, then Terry McHugh, and then Parul Gupta.
Thank you, Mayor, City Manager, City Clerk, City Council persons. I come wearing 2 hats tonight, President of the Evanston North Shore NAACP and Pastor of Second Baptist. But I believe for the sake of time and the brevity allotted to remarks, I basically stand before you as a concerned citizen and resident of our town, Evanston. Of all the places I have lived, I believe for many reasons that Evanston exceeds them all. We are a town that marches to its own beat. We are a town, though filled with a myriad of problems, still stands on the brink of doing marvelous things. Among them, caring for the less fortunate, having a heart for the most vulnerable, reaching out to aid and assist the marginal and hurting. That's the kind of town I arrived in over 3 years ago. It's the place I fell in love with, and I'm sure it's the place that we all fell in love with. People work together here. We fuss together. We struggle together. Some of us cuss a little bit, but we also achieve together, and we succeed together in Evanston. And yet the proposed 2019 budget in part appears to send glaring darts at programs and personalities that are on the front line as advocates for the distressed. Youth and young adults, present, personnel, and programs need us no matter what. Health and human service programs and people need to be in place to serve the distressed no matter what. The Gibbs-Morrison Center must be in place as a visual testimony that this town continues to care about the distressed. We've already lost the Emerson Street Y and the community hospital. It is imperative that you rethink the proposed reductions and cuts in the budget. We cannot allow the callous spirit that is spread through our nation and world to stop here. Hate has no place in our beloved community. It does not belong here. Neglect for others does not belong here. Insensitivity does not belong here. What affects one of us indirectly affects us all. Much of this budget directly affects the people who most likely will suffer the most. You can't allow that to happen. And a great majority of those people are black and brown-skinned people. You cannot allow services or personnel to be reduced in areas where suffering is the greatest. Please reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Next up, Terry McHugh, Parul Gupta, then Mike Fasilko.
Hi, I'm Terry McHugh, and I'm here for North Shore Senior Center, and we've been providing services to older adults in Evanston since 1996, and we're here to ask for restoration of the mental health board allocations. So we offer behavioral health and case management services to seniors, many of whom are low income and many of whom are homebound, either because of functional impairment or they just can't afford transportation to get the help they need. We offer the case management services. What the grants are used for is to help with programs such as assessment of home-delivered meals, caregiver support, benefits, education, counseling. And in terms of our behavioral health services, our mental health services, the research supports what we've been finding in our work with older adults, and that there is a strong link between depression, anxiety, and other mental health problems, and people's being able to control diseases like diabetes, heart disease, irritable bowel disease, and chronic pain. So we offer a sliding scale for those who don't have insurance, and our work provides education and links to other providers, as well as helping people cope with the stressors of aging. And the goal of our program is to help people remain safely in their community homes, decrease 911 calls, decrease ER visits. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Parul Gupta, Mike Vasilko, then Judith Treadway.
Hello, thank you. I'm speaking as a 15-year resident of Evanston, a mother of 2 teenagers at ETHS, and as a physician. The proposed budget cuts and position eliminations to the health department concern me greatly, as they should all Evanston residents, and will potentially cause great harm to our community, especially the uninsured, our children, our refugee population, and the immunocompromised individuals, including the elderly and pregnant women. Over the last 10 years, the department has already seen significant decreases in its size, and various positions were either terminated or absorbed by other departments. There is currently a vacancy in the assistant director position, one that was vital to maintaining partnerships with the Erie Family Health Center, the ETHS Health Clinic, and the Cradle to Career program. These are important services that fill the gaps for those who are not able to access the services at North Shore Hospital. Eliminating the communicable disease surveillance specialist concerns me greatly. We are a cosmopolitan suburb with an internationally renowned university just outside one of the largest cities in the United States. We are vulnerable at all times to outbreaks of foodborne, airborne, and other diseases. The absence of someone to oversee an action plan to be ready at all times is dangerous to our community and puts everyone at risk. When I asked Mayor Haggerty last week at the Evanston Live taping about who will fill these gaps in services to our community members, he quickly replied that the residents could seek services at Cook County. This is an unrealistic option, as the hospital is many miles away and the facility is already strained in its efforts to provide services to Chicago residents. We also know that the City of Chicago is already closing down community health centers, such as the 2E Health Center, located on the north side. I sincerely hope that you reconsider choosing this important and essential city department to gut as you seek to find a way to balance the city budget.
Thank you. Next up, Mike Vasilko, Judith Treadway, and Max Overholt.
The 2019 proposed budget overview states in revenues that there's no property tax increase. We know that's not true. We know it's going to be a fairly large property tax increase. We know you've approved an $85 million bond issue to cover $53 million for Crown Center, several $million for Howard Street. The Howard Street was supposed to be paid for by a TIF. We know that these expenses and the debt service for these expenses are going to raise property taxes for decades to come. We know that the library fund is being increased by over $500,000, $70,000 of which comes from the Good Neighbor Fund. Why is that happening? Do you know that the library director makes approximately $250,000 for being the director of our library system? That's more than the city manager. That's more than half the cost of the entire city council budget. Why isn't that being reduced? The Merrick Rose Garden is proposed for increased budgets, and yet that loses over roughly $60,000 a year. The law department is being increased by $100,000. Why does that need to take place? Maybe it's because we have so many lawsuits. The police department is being increased $600,000, and others. It goes on and on. So I would look at those things, and please remember that everybody here, all these budget cuts people are talking about in the way of services, a lot of this funding could have been devoted to those causes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We've got Judith Treadway, Max Overholt, then Claire Kelly.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Judith Treadway, 226 Callan, 8th Ward. As a resident of Evanston, I expect that the numerous public comments given by citizens sometimes warrant some further research as to the feasibility of the suggestions by citizens. property owners, renters, and businesses carry the most financial burden of our funding for city services such as fire, police, recreation, etc., and schools. It is time those individuals who benefit from working for our public institutions give a little back. They earn salaries and wages as a result of Evanston. Those earnings are invested in communities other than Evanston. Those earnings over the last 5 years, more than 5 years ago, I came before you with a proposal for employee tax, generating this option to address our budget shortfall. It was rejected. Today, you are considering the cutting of jobs, services, programs, increased taxes on some businesses, yet you will not consider a fair tax of employees employed by our taxing bodies who do not live or sustain the quality of life of Evanston residents. I understand that employees who are non-residents amount to 70% of our public employees. I ask you, for the benefit of all Evanston residents, to consider this revenue-generating tax over cutting programs and services seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Judith. Max Overholt, then Claire Kelly, then Peggy Tarr.
All right. Good evening. I would like to speak out against the proposed budget cuts to the fire department. It was just a couple weeks ago when the fire alarm went off in my apartment building. Because the engine at Station 22, for whatever reason, wasn't available, Engine 24 responded instead. Since that's proposed to be closed, my question is, just if you do that, who is going to end up responding to that area when Engine 22 isn't available? There is no way you can expect me to believe that we can realistically cover the city of Evanston with just 4 stations. So reconsider that proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Claire Kelly, and then Peggy Tarr, and Jonas Flink.
Good evening, Claire Kelly. And I'm reading on behalf of Peggy Tarr because she went home sick, and I'm going to cede my time to her. Hers might go over about 10 seconds, so I won't make a statement. This is on behalf of Peggy Tarr. Disappointed does not come close to describing my reaction to the continuation of discriminatory practices by the City of Evanston. I hold the city manager, city council, and mayor responsible for these practices. Several cases filed against the city by city employees were publicized in which the city was found guilty of discrimination and made to pay settlements to the charging parties. Now the proposed Evanston budget cuts include the laying off and firing of 2 African-American employees in the streets department. One of these employees filed an EEOC complaint against the city approximately 2 years ago. I'm sorry? And the other allegedly defended an African-American female city employee that was eventually fired. Does the city comprehend what retaliation is? Another possibility of discrimination is the city's proposal to cut the youth program under Kevin Brown, an African-American. Gossip suggests that Mr. Brown did not bow his head or shuffle along, as is demanded and expected of African-Americans in the presence of those deemed powerful. Evanston should be ashamed of itself. But bobbleheads, whether white, black, brown, yellow, or red, do not usually disagree. There are those that believe that the proposal to demolish the Harley Clark is another example of bigotry and discrimination. It seems that there are Evanstonians that would rather demolish the building than risk having non-white, non-rich folks, aka the Evanston community, patronize Harley Clark and contaminate their neighborhood. In closing, I'd like to strongly urge the League of Women Voters of Evanston learn and understand that I'm ceding my time to Peggy. Learn and understand that an Indian American does not and cannot take the place of an African American on panels it creates, such as the panel it created for its ETHS forum on October 14th, 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Peggy. All right. Next up is Jonas Flink, then Katie Trippey, then Priscilla Giles.
Good evening. My name is Jonas Flink, and I'm the Evanston Senior Services Coordinator on behalf of the North Shore Senior Center. We provide case management and supportive counseling and many other things to the population made up of seniors, many of whom have mental health issues. I believe the population we serve is one of the most vulnerable in the community. Not only do they struggle with different mental health issues, they live in poverty, they have physical impairments, ailments that come with aging, and many of them belong to minority ethnic groups. Many of the recipients of mental health support in the community, they find that when they turn 60 or 65, they're no longer eligible for a lot of mental health support. They turn seniors, and there's even less mental health support available to them than before. I believe it's imperative that there is a robust support network in place for these individuals, and I would implore the council to keep investing in the mental health board, because I believe it can save you a lot of money down the line, less cost for emergency services and first responders and other emergency services. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jonas. Katie Trippey, Priscilla Giles, then Jean Marie Fraiche.
Good evening. My name is Katie Trippey, and I live at 2427 Payne Street in the 6th Ward. I live within 1 mile of three firehouses. Station number 1 on Emerson, station number 3 and number 5 on Central Street. I'm here tonight to tell you about the worst day of my life. And that was the day that my youngest child, who was 5 years old at the time, was hit by a car in front of my house. The ambulance and the engine were there within a little more than 2 minutes. But that was the longest 2 minutes of my life. And I can't imagine if it had been 3 or more minutes. The paramedics were excellent and recognized and treated Teddy's most severe injuries, a skull fracture and a femur fracture. And I'm happy to say that because of the timely and excellent care that he received from our first responders and the doctors and nurses at Evanston Hospital, he has made a full recovery. Every mother in Evanston expects and deserves that response time and this outcome. Make no mistake, I am not suggesting that you close any of the firehouses in this town. In fact, I would argue that major repairs and remodeling need to be done at Station 4 to bring it up to the standards of our other firehouses. But I am telling you that I am not alone and that I will not stand for the mother on the west or the south side of Evanston having to wait any longer than I had to wait on that terrible day. We are not that city. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Priscilla Giles, Jean Marie, and Pat Brunger.
Priscilla Giles, 5th Ward. Leaves are changing colors and falling. Promises to help the poor, homeless, underemployed, and soon to be unemployed, if all goes according to some council members for whom this is a second high-paying job. Those who are unemployed, underemployed, are still at the same place that they were in the spring before the weather really got warm. Help all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giles. Jean Marie, and then Pat Brunger, and then Ray Freeman.
Good evening. Jean Marie Friese, 8th Ward. I, too, am here because I have deep concerns about the suggested cuts to the Health and Human Services Department. I know it's been said before, but I'm going to say it again because our voices should be heard. I think of Evanston as an exceptional city, a place like no other, a place that values providing resources and outreach to our most vulnerable citizens. If you cut public health positions, it will have a ripple effect. We will lose our standing as a state-certified health department. That certified status allowed our city to provide the H1N1 influenza vaccinations to countless residents during the 2009 pandemic. Our health department provides education and outreach, collaboration with Head Start staff and parents, collaboration with other citywide agencies such as the fire department and the police department to implement programs and task forces that deal with public health issues. Maintaining our state certified status is part of what makes Evanston exceptional. Farming out this responsibility to Cook County will result in a loss of state and federal health grant funds, which are used for a range of prevention initiatives within our city limits, and will mean that our residents will be forced to compete with 124 different municipalities and 2.5 million people in suburban Cook County who also lack a state-certified municipal health department. I fear that Evanston is slipping into mediocrity. Please don't make these cuts. Please don't make Evanston less exceptional.
Thank you, Jean Marie. Pat Brunger, Ray Friedman, then Jackie Hames. Do we have a Pat?
Yes.
Okay. Pat Brunger. Oh, did I miss you?
Yeah, Peg Har.
I did. Peg Har, and I thought that, yes, I did. Welcome, Peg.
Thank you. Good evening. As a resident of the 2nd Ward and a neighbor of Station 4, I beg you to not close it, and especially with the expansion of the Robert Crown Center, I feel that Dodge and Main will become a much more active corner, and we need these services.
I'm Pat Brunger. I'm a third-generation Evanstonian with multiple family members working for the city, especially for the fire department. And I'm asking you also not to close it. We have multiple facilities in the southwest area of Evanston that need your service. We only have one fire station down there as compared to the north part of Evanston that has two at each end of Central Street. And I know that station number 3 over here by the hospital, 600 and some of those calls each year are just for Northwestern. So I think that you need to look into that, and maybe that could become Northwestern's fire department and not our own, and they can employ their own people there. Thank you.
Thank you. We got Ray Friedman, then Jackie Hames, then Karen Courtwright.
Good evening, Mayor Haggerty, City Manager, City Council, Clerk Reed. First, I'd like to say that I agree with everybody who spoke before me. It's great to see that everybody is so passionate about the city of Evanston, how to make it great and keep it great. I want to say that the government was created by the people, for the people, all the people, not just the ones with the most money. You have a difficult task in front of you, working on a balanced budget. We had a $6 million deficit last year. We have a $7.5 million deficit this year. When you go ahead and vote to take out $50 million for a project without asking all of the people if they want to contribute to that project, it doesn't make sense to me. Harley Clark is not adding extra money to the budget deficit at all. There's one big difference between Harley Clark and Robert Crown, $50 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Jackie Hames, then Karen Courtwright, then Candace Austin.
Good evening. My name is Jackie Hames, 7th Ward. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. I work in the city, have a practice there. And I was really puzzled by the proposed cuts to the mental health board, the significant cut of about $250,000 to the budget. Given that so many members of the community have expressed support for the mental health board and the work that it does, the mental health board serves, I don't know if you know how, there's a variety of organizations that the mental health board supports, and it's not just mental health services, although that's a huge part of it, but it's also youth, infants, seniors, people that are at risk and vulnerable. And without the support from the mental health board, I'm really concerned about what will happen to these nonprofits. And I really urge you to rethink those cuts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Karen Courtwright, Candace Austin, and Betty Bogg.
Good evening. So I wanted to talk at length about, well, not at length, about
1 minute.
the youth and young adult program, but so much has been said. I just want to emphasize that much of what is said is what I feel about it. My big concern is that this appears to follow a pattern. Last year, the social workers were moved from the police department to the health department, and now they're being terminated. This year, we're breaking up the youth and young adult program, putting them in different departments, and I would not want this to come to pass, but I would bet maybe my next paycheck that we'll be talking about whether those positions will be eliminated in next year's budget. I think it's disingenuous on the part of the city manager to put this kind of budgeting forward. So I'm going to do something now and risk be unpopular, and that is offer some ideas about where other money could come from. Well,
we're going to have a meeting on Saturday you can come back to.
I'm afraid I'm out of
I'll give you.
All right,
we'll take your suggestions.
First of all,
Go ahead.
it continues to boggle my mind why we're spending millions of dollars a year suing the utilities over the pipes under James Park when the city tells us there is no health harm. Let's stop spending $5 million a year on that, shall we? And secondly, Mr. Bobquitz, I do wish you had found the money to have the consultant in this year to help reimagine staffing at the police department, because although I recognize there's a small decrease in the number of officers, an analysis of our staffing shows that we are way out of whack relative to other cities like Evanston in Illinois.
Thanks, Karen. All right. We've got Candace Austin, then Betty Bogg, then Stacy Geiger.
Hi, I'm Candace Austin, and I'm here to advocate for the continuation of the Evanston Youth and Young Adult Program. I know it will be reiterated. We've definitely talked a lot about it, but it's worth it. And I think my voice is just as important as everybody else's. I'm an Evanstonian. I've lived here over 60 years. Myself and my, who are now young adult children, graduated from Evanston schools, and I have a vested interest in this community. I was here when Evanston was a lot smaller and community was a lot stronger. I've always wanted to believe Evanston is a community that wanted all of its families to live productive lives, regardless of their income, ethnicity, cultural, religious beliefs, and so on. In fact, I'm very proud of the many different effective programs we offer our community. With that being said, I recently retired from District 65 Family Center, where I was in close contact with the youth and young adult program. And I had a caseload of families that were always telling me how much they enjoyed being a part of a program that offered the services of the youth and adult family services. Do you know that that program offers a community resource where restaurants gives food to eligible families? Do you know that the youth and young adult services effectiveness from the knowledgeable, dedicated leadership of Kevin Brown and the knowledgeable, passionate dedication of the staff, and the implementation of the high-quality program that they have is really having a positive effect on people's lives in Evanston. So along with the rest of the people that have got here, I just wonder, what is the real agenda? Why is the city using a budget deficit issue for all practical purposes to dismantle an effective program?
Thank you,
Thank you.
Candace. Thank you. We've got Betty Boggs, Stacy Geiger, Terry Campbell.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, Mr. City Clerk, and council members. My name is Betty Bogg. I'm the Executive Director of Connections for the Homeless, and I should never, ever have to speak after Dr. Reverend Michael Neighbors because he says everything better than I could ever imagine doing. You most know that we work throughout the city serving participants who suffer from severe mental illness. At this time, we are serving up to 50 people every day in our drop-in center that is funded through the Mental Health Board. So I'm here to urge you not to cut funding to the Mental Health Board. I attended a budget meeting with Mr. Bobkowitz this morning where I was struck by the energy behind resistance to closing the fire station. And what I was struck by in that discussion was the amount of stress that is put on emergency response systems, particularly by higher users of those systems, specifically people with severe mental illness. So in conjunction with each other, I think those kinds of cuts could be really detrimental to the city, and I urge you not to make them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Betty. Stacy Geiger, then Terry Campbell.
Excuse me. I'm going to ask her, if it's all right, for her to split some of my minutes, because I'm going to be real brief.
Okay. Madeline, are you signed up? You're not.
She's giving me the minutes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight to support the Young Youth and Adult program here. I'm an Evanstonian, and I support the program so much. Without the program, the kids and whoever else needs this program to support them to get through what they need to get through. Without it, they don't have it. I've supported people through this program, helped people that I know that needed the help to get jobs, to get themselves to where they needed to be in their life. Please, whatever you do, do not take it away, because without it, they have nothing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madeline Ducree here, real quick. I just want to say that 2 nights ago, I was doing some research, and I happened to, on the judges, and I happened to see Timothy Evans, who's over the chief judge over the Cook County, and it was amazing the way he did this, and I want to bring it to your attention, and more so to you, Wally. The man had, I think, about 180 people he had to get rid of, right? They brought it down to him. What he did was to talk to his staff. He talked to the people that worked under him. And they sat down and they worked together. And guess what? Not one of those people was fired. Because he gave them, they agreed to it. They talked to each other, okay? You didn't do that, Wally. You didn't do that, okay? Now, Round Table, where's Round Table in here? Round Table did not, they said, if they quoted Kevin Brown right, you did not tell him nothing. You didn't say anything to Mr., what's his name? Start with an H. Big, tall black man. Handsome black man. What's his name? Come on.
Hemingway.
Okay. You know who I'm talking about, Wally.
Lawrence Hemingway.
What I'm saying, Mr. Hemingway, what I'm saying is that all you had to do was talk to your staff. Work together. Now you have people pitted against each other. You already have the Harley Clark people pitted against each other. Come on.
All right.
I ask you, 10 furloughs he gave those people, and guess how much they were able to save? $6.2 something million. Check it out. Thank you for your
Thank you, Mr. Koo. All right, I'm getting a little lost on my thing. Let's see, Terry. What's your name?
Terry Campbell.
Terry, all right. We're back on track. All right, Terry, welcome.
Okay. I am a Fifth Ward resident being gentrified out. I'm here on behalf of mental health and health and human services. Mental health unchecked can result in homelessness and affect the economic well-being of Evanston families, which will affect health and human services. One of the things I heard earlier, they were saying that maybe they could go to the Health and Human Services, county care. I was actually just at a county care budget cut meeting, and they're proposing quite a few cuts. So with cuts for Evanston and cuts for county care, that leaves the marginal kind of out. The next thing would be with the proposed cut, the populations and the lack of the health resources, which will tax the actual economy as well as people who will not be able to work, therefore will not be able to pay taxes. So you're in fact cannibalizing yourself by making these cuts. With the proposed budget cuts, I also have a question. What happens to the children if you take away these programs? Where is their safety? What happens to them? The unfortunate part is we as parents, we have to work. We have to work. We have to pay bills. So now we have latchkeys kids who are running around without supervision or who may become victims. But guess what? There's no victim services. Just, what happens to what's happening? What's the result?
Thank you, Terry. Next one is Kai Kim. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Then we have Joey Harrison, then Jane Jones.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. It's Q Kim, by the way. I'm here on behalf of Trilogy Inc. We provide community mental health services to the city of Evanston. Others have done, and I'm also here to speak to protect the mental health board funding. Others have done an amazing job of expressing the need for these dollars. But I just wanted to focus on sort of the value for dollar that you get. Currently, we receive $30,000 to provide 20 hours a week of case management outreach and linkage services to the city. We reach about 100 people a year. I'm looking at the notes here. And we do outreach and general outreach and linkage at Library and Hilda's Place. And our presence helps to build trust with those that are very weary of enrolling in services with mental health services. And out of those 100, a full 66%, 66 people need higher level of services, and clearly there's a need there. And I think, the typical case manager only exceeds about 50 people a year, and for $30,000, you're getting 100 people. And I'm sure everybody here who receives mental health board money puts out this effort and this level of dedication to make those dollars stretch. And I ask that you protect this funding.
Thank you. Joey Harrison, Jane Jones, and then Albert Gibbs. Do we have a Joey Harrison? Yes. Okay.
Mayor, City Manager, Alderpersons. My name is Joy Harrison, and you've seen the sign maybe that says, "Drive safely, as if your children live here." How about a new sign that says, "Save Station 4," just in case your house is on fire, my house was on fire, and they came, and they did a good job. We could live on a farm in central Illinois where there's lots of privacy, but no, you wouldn't be near a police or a fire station, and who knows how long it would take for them to find you. We choose to live here so that we can have some help when we need it. So please keep the fire station.
Thank you. Jane Jones, Albert Gibbs, then James Engelman.
Hi, my name is Jane Lilienfeld Jones, and I live in Ward 9, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am speaking for the fire department, and I am a resident of the southwest side, and this would impact me greatly because this is the closest station, I believe, to where I live. And I understand that in the 8 square miles approximately 8 square miles that is the city of Evanston, they get over 10,000 calls a year. I know that there's at least one fire station that has to sort of swap out their firefighters with their ambulance people because they get overwhelmed. So they're stressed as it is. I have tremendous respect. I'm a current member of the Citizen Fire Academy, and I've been learning the marvelous things these people do. They really should be, they should be supported and honored as remarkable people. And I see there's a lot of health and safety issues here. This is a big one, public health. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jane. Albert Gibbs, James Engelman, then Josh Hall. And for those of you keeping track, Mr. Gibbs is number 40 on our list of 50. Welcome.
Welcome. Albert Gibbs, 5th Ward. Our house is on fire. Our Evanston City Government house is on fire, and we're closing fire stations. Wow, it's amazing. Restructuring of the budget in the youth program is an outdated maneuver of divide and conquer. Actually, it was about separation of families. It was the purpose of slavery. Move the money that was separated out of the general fund for waste management, move it into a separate fund, into the 5th Ward. It could fund Morrison Center, the Gibbs Morrison Center, and any other programs that involve the youth. This current budget, as presented, has serious adverse effects on the 5th Ward. Mr. Bobowitz, you appear to be very vindictive. In Vinsville, we've had 3 consecutive budgets where we're just not making it. And I heard them give you awards and everything, or the accolades and stuff like that, but I'm wondering what in the heck is happening with city government? What's going on with the ethics here? What's going on with the treatment of people here? It seems like you invite us to lunch. You're saying this is government of the people, for the people, and by the people, and however that's be said. You invite us for lunch. You're serving soup. You guys get the spoons and we get the forks. That's crazy.
Thank you. Next up, we got James Engelman, Josh Hall, then Crystal Morales.
Hi. I'm James Engelman from the 5th Ward, and I live at 24 Brown. I'd like you to extend the agreement between the Comcast franchise and the city, because Comcast is a good company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. We got Josh Hall, Crystal Morales. Maybe I have Judith Treadway twice because Judith was already up, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, I apologize for the little error on my part. I was going to say this for October 27th, but I have 3 jobs, and one of which is home health care, and I also care for family members as well. They live in 8th Ward. Simply put, because I don't want to waste anyone's time here, if they do not have that care, my concern is that they will not get the need dealt with. A lot of these people, their pulse can raise to 140, blood pressure 198 over 86, and I want these people to be taken care of. They live in Evanston. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Josh. All right, Crystal. All right, well, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to advocate for the youth and adult outreach program. I'm just going to kind of reiterate because a lot of the points were hit already. I just want to bring forward what this program provides. This youth and adult program provides summer jobs for hundreds of youth every summer, expungement programs which allow second chances for people to get jobs and have a second chance at life. It also provides opportunities, violence, eruption, as well as conflict resolution services, educational enhancement programs, and much more. Where do these youth go without this foundation that's being built for them when they don't have it at home? I think that as the city of Evanston, we really need to think. If we're not part of the solution, we become part of the problem. Do not get rid of this program. It means a lot to Evanston.
Thank you, Crystal. We've got Jaheim Holden. The names I've got: Jaheim Holden, Blake Peters, and then Louise Brown.
Hey, how you guys doing? I'm Jaheim Holden from Evanston Township High School. I play on the varsity basketball team at the Evanston Township High School, and I've been able to work in the Mayor Summers Youth Job Employment Program, and for 3 years roughly, and it's been like a tremendous experience for me. And also myself and a couple of my teammates and my friends, we also meet with the outreach team twice a month, you know, for them to check up on us and just talk about life and what's going on. And I just think that what they do for us is really tremendous, because it's kids like us who really don't have people to lean on every day. And with them, they're more so like father figures to us, and I just really appreciate having them. So what they do for us, I hope that they can continue to do for everyone else under us. And, you know, thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Jaheim. Blake Peters, and then we've got Louise Brown, and then Sherry Bevel. Welcome.
Good evening. So I'm Blake Peters. I'm a sophomore at Evanston Township High School, where I'm also on the varsity basketball team. And like Jaheim, the youth and young adult division has helped me personally a lot over the past year, especially keeping me grounded. I've been able to develop a lot of great relationships, and I think it would be disappointing if the service was dismantled, and I would just really appreciate if it was kept together. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Blake. Louise Brown, Sherry Bevel, then Karen Rutzel.
Yes, hello, City Manager and Council people. I'm C. Louise Brown, and I'm an Evanston resident of the 8th Ward. I've been a resident for 52 years, okay? I've worked here in Evanston, but also upon retirement, I've been a concerned and very active citizen. I could speak on all of these things, mental health and public health, certainly, because the health department has been the leader in the state and the nation in many public health issues. Vulnerable population. But my talk now is about adding fees for parking on Sunday. I think that would be a very serious mistake. The faith communities that are involved in the downtown area, the eating establishments that are there, we are trying to push people away from Evanston rather than bringing them in. I think many people, we could go a lot of places. You know, there could be a lot of places that we could go to. So to increase or add fees to the downtown area for parking would be a very, very, very mistake. I would like for you to seriously consider that and an adjustment to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Give me 1 second. Alderman Rainey.
Just want to follow up on Mrs. Brown's comments. She not only knows a lot about the health department, but when I first started on this council, or at least while I was a newbie on this council, C. Louise Brown was the director of Evanston's health department. So she forgot to mention that.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey. Sherry?
Hi, good evening, Mayor Haggerty and members of the council. I'm Dr. Sherry Bevel, and I teach social justice at DePaul University, and I'm also curriculum director for the Addie Wyatt Center for Nonviolence Training. I'm here with my colleagues, Gail Schechter and Pam Smith. We're here to ask that you keep the youth and young adult program intact. We were honored this summer to work with 25 young people who got extensive training in Dr. Martin Luther King's philosophy and practical steps for nonviolently addressing social problems. It was a privilege to watch Kevin Brown and his extremely competent, highly effective, and truly motivated staff work with young people, many of whom are gifted but also facing challenges. The staff's holistic approach allowed the young people to build trust with each other and the program staff, and to offer services to meet a variety of needs. They're already hard at work, those that go to Evanston Township, executing their plan for sharing nonviolence with their schoolmates. In closing, I'd like to ask you to consider what the consequences to individuals and the community will be if young people are denied competent professional support in their quest to become fully participating members of the community. Thank you.
Great, thank you, thank you. All right, we've got Karen Rutzel, and then our last speaker is Doreen Price.
Good evening. I'm Corrine Rutzel. I'm a 30-year resident of Evanston. I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice and also work with a number of agencies in town. And I've heard people speak tonight about mental health and about physical health. And I think that I'm not going to reiterate what other people have said, but just to focus on the process for a moment here. There is a budget crisis. You guys have difficult decisions to make. I realize that. And a number of years ago, there was a problem, and there will probably be a problem into the future. But one of the things that was done a number of years ago was to try and develop some priorities. There was an E-plan that residents were asked to talk about what their health needs were and what their priorities were. Mental health and obesity were the two top priorities. This year, we went through a process in this community of filling out budget priorities in budgeting. There were 10 top programs. Number one was mental health funding through the Mental Health Board. So I ask you, as others have done, to not cut that program. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Corrine. All right, and our last speaker is Doreen Price. Oh, excuse me. I've got Bennett Johnson, and then Bennett, why don't you come on up if that's okay? We'll do Bennett and then Doreen. I'm sorry I missed you, Bennett. You were there. And then that'll wrap up public comment.
I forgive you, Mayor Hagerty. I've been discriminated against before. I'll be quite brief. I'm here, of course, to save Harley Clark. The rationale has always been given. The demolition will cost more on an ongoing basis, not cheaper, where the restoration would have a cultural positive thing and also be a service to the entire community. And one thing that the MOU neglected to add was Alderman Simmons' request that the Dunes Group take all responsibility for financing, which was not included. We have a Republican form of government. You all represent the people. You're what they call politicians, but you're also public servants. And I want to make clear, I've been involved in politics for many years, and there's several things that motivate politicians: morality, racial bias, and money. The best example of the worst kind of governor is Mohammed bin Salman, because we know what he did. The best example is my close personal friend, Harold Washington, who, when he died, had an estate after over 20 years in politics of $250,000. I'm suggesting that when the referendum is passed to keep Harley Clark on November the 6th, that you, as servants of the public, respect the voice of the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Bennett. All right, and Doreen Price to wrap it up tonight.
In a sense, that's exactly what I usually prefer to do in terms of acknowledging all the great contributions, pro and con, and also with regard to the measure of civility that was required. I think that they far exceeded it and went into the land that we know of as heart. And I think heart is something that, and kindness, is something that's way above the law and the way above all these other things, because people get out of things in terms of, the letter of the law, but we have the spirit of the law. And I think of Shakespeare with regard Merchant of Venice. So all of you contemplate that, you lawyers especially, contemplate Merchant of Venice type of style of negotiation and talking to people with regard to the whole truth. That's exactly what you got today in terms of how I saw it. I learned some things from my fellow residents and advocates. I have an article that I will send to the committee, and it's about the city of Durham. And in today's Washington Post, they quoted it from Next City, which I highly recommend, even for residents here to read. And what happened was they had a transformation of Durham, which sounds in many ways similar in terms of the gentrification effects, in terms of racism issues, in terms of how do you get the community involved, in terms of different people react differently, which means to get black people more involved in a city that they had a great majority in and lost. People had to do outreach. That simply posting is not working. Outreach requires social workers. So I say we increase the social workers, we increase health and human services. In this article, they talk about saving money, give specific examples. It's a complete article to answer most of the questions that the council has been asking for the past 3 months or 4 months, and is relevant to consideration in terms of the budget.
Thank you, Doreen. Yeah, we're over a minute. But thank you, and thank you, everybody, for caring as much as you all do about this fine city that we all live in. We're going to move now to the first order of business tonight, which is the special order of business, which is a presentation of the 2019 budget and update to the budget balancing worksheet. City Manager, I would also ask, because we have so many people here and watching at home, if you could also sort of lay out the process. This is our first meeting where we're really discussing it. I know we have another one coming up later this week. I want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. If we could put up the presentation. There we go. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's my pleasure this evening to present to you the proposed fiscal year 2019 budget for the city of Evanston, Illinois. I'll be joined this evening by Assistant City Manager Erica Storley and Chief Financial Officer Hitesh Desai to walk through the budget. Next slide, please. We're going to this evening go through an overview of the proposed budget, explain what is proposed to balance the budget, and then go through the capital improvements plan. As Mayor Haggerty requested, let me give a little calendar of events from this evening forward. The formal public hearing for the budget will occur on Saturday, October 27th at 9 o'clock. The council receives public comment. We will present to you ordinances to be introduced regarding property tax levies and other fee and charge changes that will be recommended for fiscal year 2019. That meeting normally lasts 3.5 hours. And then next Monday, 1 week from tonight, October 29th, the City Council will meet and deliberate. We hope to get through all the presentations. We would ask certainly if you have any additional questions tonight, but our hope is that by the end of the public hearing on the 27th, certainly the Council will be ready to get into deliberations on the 29th. And then in addition to the meetings on the 27th and 29th, the Council will also have the budget as a primary agenda item on Monday, November 12th and Monday, November 19th. So it is our hope that that will be sufficient time for the Council to deliberate so that the budget will be adopted on the 19th. If there are trailing ordinances that require second readings, that could come on the 26th of November or the 10th of December. As you know, any changes to the property tax levy have to be into the county about then, and so we would hope to be wrapped up with the majority of the work by Thanksgiving. Next slide. This year, the City Council set several goals for spending, and I wanted to just review those goals and talk a little bit about them and the work that we have done this year. Certainly, investing in city infrastructure and facilities is an important issue. We've talked a lot about the Robert Crown Center, but we are investing all over the city in infrastructure, water, sewer, our 75 parks, street resurfacing, improvements to city facilities. The investment continues, and this City Council decided that the Robert Crown Center, after 25 years of discussion, was something that was important to move forward with, and included in this proposed budget is financing to pay the debt service for that project, which is well underway. Next, enhance community development and job creation citywide, a large umbrella for many different municipal services. Certainly, first and foremost, we're very proud of the 4-star rating that we received from the Star Communities organization earlier this year. Really, that encompasses the work that we're doing with community development to make Evanston one of the most livable cities in America. Our community development department, of course, worries about specific programs in transportation, housing, planning, and current development, and transit issues. And so very proud of the work that our community development department does. The issue of job creation citywide is an issue that I feel we have fallen short on. We have an outstanding youth and young adult division, as we've heard this evening, and included in this budget is full funding. Let me repeat, full funding for that operation. However, I believe we must spend more time working on job creation. There are still too many Evanston residents of all ages without jobs, and I'm proposing changes that would allow us to focus more clearly on the issue of job creation citywide. Next, affordable housing expansion. The City Council, really unprecedented in my over 9 years as your city manager, you have set quarterly meetings to talk about affordable housing, to work on plans and options, and that has been ongoing throughout calendar 2018. Your next meeting to discuss housing issues is coming up at the end of the month. Next, further police community relations initiatives. Many things have been worked this year. We've had a citizen committee that is finishing its work looking at the citizen police complaint review process. We've had an alternatives to arrest committee that is finishing its work. So a number of things with that. We also are faced with hiring a new chief of police, and we've had a community dialogues thus far. We will have community members involved in the interview process of our new chief of police, so look forward to bringing a new chief on board at the beginning of 2019. It's also important to note that crime is down. I think police community relations are generally in a better place today than they were 12 months ago. Clearly, there's always work to do, but as we talk about budgets, as we talk about community priorities, clearly public safety is paramount. A police department that reflects our community, a police department that works with our community, and I'm very proud that the Evanston Police Department fits that role, and I think has done an excellent job this past year with this particular goal. Next is ensuring equity in all city operations. We've hired a chief equity officer, Dr. Pat Effiam. She continues her work in all of this, but clearly there's still work to do. Dr. Effiam will be here on Saturday after the public comment to give you her analysis of the proposed budget through an equity lens. And so we feel that it is important, you feel that it's important to view the budget in those terms, and Dr. Effiam will be here. We hope to continue our work in the coming year on equity to continue to ensure equity in all city operations. And finally, stabilize long-term city finances. This budget and the work that we have done this year on this budget has really been focused on stabilization. Next slide. I really want to start this proposed budget description tonight with one word, and that's balance. It's not only balancing our accounts, but it's balancing the service that the residents of Evanston expect. As you've heard tonight very eloquently from many members of the public, people really appreciate the special place that Evanston is. They really appreciate all of the services that we provide. But there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance between the services that we provide and the resources necessary to provide those services. And this budget, while difficult, is focused on providing that balance. balance. It is not good for the community. It's not good for your staff to constantly be in a cycle of reviewing budgets. And so our hope with this proposed budget this year is that we will achieve a better balance that will allow us to move forward providing quality services to our residents. But let me make this as strong and as emphatic as I can, that we can only provide those services with resources, sustainable resources that allow as many people who want to live here to continue living here. As I have worked in my way around the community the last couple of weeks with these community budget workshops, time and again I've heard from residents who express their love for this community, express their love to be part of this community, but they're concerned about the costs associated with being here. And so I believe that the budget that I'm proposing to you strikes a very difficult balance, but it strikes a balance that I think will allow us to go forward. Next slide. I'd like to call up, Hitesh, are you going to start things off? Hitesh Desai. We'll start, I think, Ms. Luz Lakin and Mr. Early as well. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and the members of the City Council. So looking at the 2019 all funds overview, around $320 million. It's a decrease of around $15 million, which is around 4.6%. Some of the major items: library capital, $8.2 million. Washington National TIF, as you all know, we are closing this year, so there is a $9 million decrease in that. Capital fund, some of the projects, compared to the current year, so we have a decline of or decrease of $16 million. And Crown Construction, which we would be working on next year, so it's a $15 million increase there in the Crown. And
Hitesh, can I ask one question on that other slide? So, no, the other slide.
Can you?
No.
The previous slide. Oh, sure. Okay, right here.
Okay, yeah. So I've been struggling to get my head around the Washington National TIF. So we created a TIF. It had a baseline value. It lasted for 23 years. It was an incredibly successful TIF.
Right.
And now you're saying, okay, that budget of which this year it was $335 million. Now next year you're proposing $320 million. This $9.2 million decrease because the TIF no longer exists. But doesn't that and this is where I always have trouble wrapping my head around this, and you and I have talked about this. Does that not wrap now into the overall, city coffers, so to speak, that additional value of that property?
Right. So you're right in terms of this is on the expense side. So like we are spending roughly $8 million this year in Washington National. So that expense would go down by that $9.2 million, the expense side.
Right, so that was Fountain Square. Got it.
Right. Revenue side, yes, Washington National TIF would release around $60 to $70 million in EAV. Again,
it increased that much. $60 to $70 million.
Goes to the general tax EAV. But again,
why don't you go to slide 10?
Sure.
When we get to one.
So this is the one, and this would be a better one, like right here. 2017 EAV is almost $2.7 billion, and our tax levy is $40.8 million. So our tax rate for 17 is 1.49% of the EAV. Now, next year, $64 million would be added to the general tax EAV, so which would bring our estimated 18 levy to $2.8 million without any other additional increases. And if you see that in the levy increase to recapture that TIF EAV, $1 million, the rate would remain the same at 1.49. Again, yes, the city as a whole just gets 17% of that tax levy. Bulk of that goes to, almost 2/3 goes to the school districts.
So we're going to recapture $1 million, you're saying. The schools then, if they get 2/3, they should be getting $2 million or more.
More than that.
More than $2 million is going to go into the schools. Okay, thank you.
But then how much were we getting for each year from the TIF?
TIF, it would be like roughly $1 million right now if the EAV goes up with the other projects, going in that area. Yeah, I mean, we would get it more depending on the economy overall and the housing market and all that.
Oh, okay, yeah, you can go back to the beginning. I'm sorry to have interrupted it.
That was a great slide.
Okay, so we started a baseline budget right here. So I was right here on $320 million. Again, just before Kate Lewis takes over for the next few slides, I will talk about the baseline budget.
Good evening. Kate Lewis, Lakin Senior Management Analyst. I'm going to go through the baseline budget that we have as sort of our starting point with the $7.4 million deficit that you've heard a number of times at this point. So in the general fund, that's $4.9 million deficits. That makes up the bulk of that. And then we're adding $1 million this year for Crown Project debt service. That's for the 2019 payment on those bonds that were issued last year, or I'm sorry, in 2018. And then our last piece of that deficit is $1.5 million to go to general fund reserves, and that's to reach our policy of 16.6% by the end of 2021. So that's a multi-year plan that we're starting on with this budget. Going into a bit more detail on the $4.9 million in the general fund deficit, this comes from both some revenue changes and some expense changes. On the revenue side, building permits decreased from the 2018 budget, which was already a significant decrease from the budget prior to that. That was about $1.7 million, and that comes from our community development department doing their estimates on the buildings that they expect to come in. Sales tax also decreased, both state and home rule, and we make those estimates based on what we get from the Illinois Municipal League, and those are based on actuals that they've been seeing over the course of the year so far. Natural gas and electric utility taxes are also both decreasing. These have been based on trends from the last few years. We've just seen a little bit of a downward in our actuals those past couple of years. Telecommunications, cable franchise fees have gone down. We decreased our budgets on those $400,000. That was also based on the actuals. More people are skipping cable, skipping landlines, and those revenues are going down as a result. And then finally, our recreation program fees have also decreased from the 2018 budget into this year's 2019 proposed budget. Those came from estimates from our Parks and Recreation Department as well.
Kate, I got a question up here for you, or a comment, Alderman Rainey.
What are the percentages there? Forget building permit revenues,
Sure.
But sales tax, state and home rule, what percentage of the total is that 400,000?
I'm going to make eye contact with Alex Thorpe and have him pull some of those in the next couple of minutes. We'll come back on that.
That's a huge number. Does any of that 400,000 include the skimming off that the state is taking for administrative costs? Or is
yes.
some of it is?
Yeah, good evening. The total, we roughly taken around 16 to 17 million combined in sales tax and home rule tax.
Yeah.
So if you look at this, it would be around 2.5% of the total. And that includes, yes, the administrative fees.
Administrative fees. That just seems like...
So, I mean, I just want to elaborate a little more on the sales tax. So my understanding, again, part of this, even though we've got Target in town, we seem to have a really vibrant downtown, part of it's just, again, more and more people shopping online. When they're shopping online, even though there's the Wayfair rule, which the Supreme Court just passed, which said you have to pay sales tax to a community, they're only paying the 6% sales tax. So Amazon's already doing that. They're just giving us 6%. If you buy something here in town, you're paying 10%. Evanston's getting 2 points out of that 10%. We're getting correct, and so I mean that's partly
yes.
what is that what's going on here? I mean,
right, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when this thing came out about the Wayfair, the Supreme Court judgment, and we thought that okay, and we got the estimates from I think the IDOR and the IML that okay, we would get additional revenue of $130,000, and one of the reasons for that is Amazon and some of the other big online vendors, they were already paying us the tax because they had the physical presence here. Again, the Supreme Court ruling does not include some of those third-party vendors which sell on the Amazon. So it's still unclear whether they would continue voluntarily paying the tax to us. But again, I mean, it depends on each vendor. Like on my personal note, I ordered something from Walmart yesterday. and they charge the full 10% tax, which is of my town rate. So I was happy to see that. So,
Right. But Amazon's not paying the full 10%.
Right.
Amazon's just paying the state the 6% of which we're only getting 1 point
Right.
of that 6%. So, I mean, we've constructed a whole revenue model for this city, as of all cities around this country, based on sort of the way the economy used to be. And the economy is changing, and perhaps we have to look at our revenue and change as the economy is changing. And certainly one of those things was with the ride share, which this council last year looked at, and maybe we'll look at again this year. So, Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Tesh. I just have one quick question regarding the building permits revenue, the decrease of the 1.7. So I can't remember how many developments we did this year, but next year we have 4 new developments.
I mean, I would defer it to the community development because, we got the numbers from there.
I'm just curious, how are we calculating the 1.7 in deficit with 4 new buildings that have been approved? Albion?
1.7 million, just to clarify, Alderman, that's a reduction.
Right, that's my question.
Good evening, Johanna Leonard, Community Development Director. The reduction is based on a few things. One is Northwestern's construction activity is significantly down.
Sure.
We are not anticipating anything beyond a small general activity, construction activity at Northwestern. Some of those permit the Albion. That's this year. We're getting that revenue this year. So some of these projects that you're thinking of that are approved are hitting this year, and then they may be hitting in 2019. But until we feel confident that they are going to occur, we haven't budgeted them.
So just quick question, how much then are you budgeting? And I'm sure it's in our...
I'm sorry, I don't have it right.
I think it's $3.5 million.
You can find it. You can find it.
$3.5 million for 2019.
How much?
$3.5 million.
Thank you. And so I'll, at a later date, Albion, Emerson, Trammell Crow, as well as Condor are the 4 that have been approved.
So Albion and Emerson are this year.
Are this year. And then Trammell Crow.
Trammell Crow and 1815 Ridge are next year.
Okay.
Just a question on this. So, why should we feel confident in this year's projection of 3.5 million when we've been off the last 2 years?
Well, I think because
we've tried to adjust to accommodate what has been we've seen a downward trend in the construction value. We think we're going to get close to this year's number. I think previous years we had counted that approved plan developments developers were going to develop when they on their timeline, but things like steel tariffs have added some changes to construction. Other financing packages didn't come when developers sought other projects. So we've tried to pull back and not assume that things are going to happen the year that they're happening. I think we assumed that the 1815 Ridge project was going to happen last year, and it hasn't. And they're going to come in for an extension later this year. So we're doing the best we can to anticipate other people's timelines.
Okay, thanks, Johanna. We got Alderman Rainey and then Alderman Fisk.
He answered a question.
Oh, you're good? Okay, Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious. I asked for a budget memo on purchasing at Northwestern's stores on campus. Did we ever get an answer to that? Do we collect sales tax from that?
We do, yes, and that budget memo should have been in the October 19th group.
Okay, I didn't see it, and I don't expect that when Northwestern purchases anything that they pay tax on that. That they're tax exempt, and so when they make purchases of goods, we don't receive tax on that. Is that correct, or do we know?
I believe that is correct.
Yes, if they are tax exempt, definitely they won't be paying that. So
right.
Yes, we won't get that. But if someone buys at their shops, they collect the sales tax and then they remit to the state government.
Right. So we need them to shop. Do we have any idea how much the university does purchase each year of goods? Okay, I'm curious.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to the expense side of the equation, again, adding up to that $4.9 million operating deficit in the general fund. Piece of this is increases to salary and benefits. Makes up about $2.6 million of the difference. Again, that is taking a general wage increase for all employees, union and non-union, is built into the baseline, as well as step increases that are required in our union contracts. There's an increase in the transfer to the insurance fund. This accounts for health insurance cost increases in the next year. And then we have a decreased transfer to our solid waste fund. This is based on the plans that Director Dave Stoneback has presented to Council, and that is being replaced by property tax changes in the solid waste fund. And then finally, we also have a decrease in our transfer to the debt service fund. This is based on a little bit of redistribution of debt between our existing general obligation debt and what's being issued for the Robert Crown Center. And then I'm going to bring Hitesh Desai back up for the property tax.
Thank you, Kate. So again, no increase to the city portion of the rate. Again, as we say, we are just increasing to recapture the Washington National TIF property, so that would be not impact our existing City of Evanston property tax rate, just the city portion of that. And again, that's what you see that $1 million out of that $628,000 in general fund, another $400,000 in the solid waste fund. Closure of TIF will add estimated $64 million. We touched on that one. We looked at these things too, that almost $64 million would go to the general tax base with the closure of the Washington TIF this year. Budget balancing worksheet. And again, I think Kate touched on some of the things which she talked about, the baseline deficit, about the $4.9 million, which you see there. Crown debt service, about $1 million more, and then contribution to general fund reserve to bring it to the 16.6% of the operating expense in next 3 years. So the total deficit then comes to around $7.3 million. And then we prepared the budget balancing worksheet as a part of included in our proposed budget, and which estimates to bring in revenue of $3.2 million and expenditure reductions of $4.2 million. And ultimate result would be a $224,000 operating surplus in the general fund at the end of 19. Budget balancing worksheet, Erica.
Good evening, Erica Storley, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to walk through all of the changes on the budget balancing worksheet as far as increased proposed revenues and proposed decreases in expenses. So first of all, we're proposing an increase to the transportation network tax, which is the Uber Lyft tax. That is a typo. We're proposing to increase it from a current 20 cents to 45 cents. That would bring us an extra $375,000 a year if approved. For the first time in 10 years, we're proposing a wheel tax increase from $75 to $85. We're proposing to redo the way we do vacation rental permits. As you remember from last year, we implemented the Airbnb tax. We are proposing to expand that to things like vrbo.com and the other vacation rental websites. We're proposing some new fees for expediting permits in the Community Development Department. Right now, there can be some long lead time on some of those permits, and with the way construction is going on the home side of things, not necessarily in the large developments, there's a demand for these permits to be expedited, and some builders would pay extra for that service. And we're also proposing some transfers from water, sewer, special assessment. There's some drawdown available there, and we're proposing to take advantage of that in this next fiscal year. One of the revenue changes related to parking is the proposed meter rate increase for the downtown area from $1 an hour to $2 an hour, with the outlying areas staying at the $1 an hour. All of those revenues would go into the parking fund. The other proposed changes with the parking include some of the ones that have been talked about earlier this evening, but they are all split between either a 50-50 split with the parking fund and the general fund, or all into the general fund. So things like the residential parking permit, right now that is something that goes all into the general fund along with wheel tax and all tickets. So we're proposing an expired meter ticket increase. Last year, if you recall, we went to $20. We're proposing to go to $25 next year. We talk a lot about the demand-based pricing strategy for parking earlier this summer in September, about how we can move people into different parking areas based on the demand, and also leaving people the option of parking at places where there's low or no cost. We're proposing to keep the first hour free at the garages and keeping the garages free on Sundays. In contrast to that, we're proposing to charge for Sunday meters and also increase the commuter lot rates by 25 cents an hour, and then increasing the hourly deck fees mostly to account for the longer stays. So you won't see any changes in the 0 to 4 hours, but anything over 5 hours you'll see some changes in. And we couldn't reduce the $7.5 million deficit without position reductions, so unfortunately we did have to do some layoffs this year. We are proposing to reduce 38.5 overall positions. We did do 18 layoffs a couple of weeks ago. 21 of those positions are vacant, but there are 7 new positions proposed in this year's budget for a net reduction of 31.5 positions. Program changes. We've already talked a lot about cultural arts administration and how that program has been proposed to be reduced. The Fire Station 4 closure, elimination of the community engagement programs that the fire department does. We're proposing to contract out the operations of the Gibbs Morrison Cultural Center, eliminate the World Arts and Music Festival, and the Vital Records Service. There's been a reorganization of the Victim Services program over the last year, with the health department taking on many of that services. Now with more people trained in how to do that, there's some savings that can be realized if we move some of those additional responsibilities to existing personnel in the department, while also utilizing outside resources to handle some of the other facets of that program. And then there's a proposal to eliminate the storefront modernization program that's currently run out of economic development, as well as reduce the mental health board funding by $250,000 a year. We're proposing that we would have no general wage increase for non-union employees. So as you saw earlier, there's a wage increase built into the budget because right now we're in the middle of union negotiations with all 4 of our bargaining units for contracts that would start on January 1st. Because we don't know the outcome of those negotiations yet, we had to build something into the baseline, but for non-union employees, we're proposing a 0% increase for next year. So you'll see a reduction on the budget balancing worksheet for the amount of that for those non-union employees. We do have some additions in community development in order to achieve the expedited permit review, the addition of a planner and a customer service representative. We also have reductions to the community health staff that was also discussed earlier. We have new costs this year for the body-worn camera program. That program is costing about $250,000 a year, and we're now in the year where a lot of the grants have expired, so we're now taking on more of the full cost of that program. We've been in talks with Northwestern University about getting reimbursement for currently unreimbursed police overtime that happens at the football games and some of the basketball games. They've been receptive to taking on the cost of that service, so we're appreciative of that. We're proposing the elimination of all of the vacant positions in the police department, and then staff reductions have been realized in other departments as well, CMO, finance, law. Basically, no department was immune from layoffs this year. Next year's budget has $3.5 million in capital improvements in the parking fund. We've got much of the Robert Crown parking expense happening in 2019, as well as some of the projects that we talked about earlier in APW that weren't actually achieved this year that will still need to be done, but have sort of queued up behind all the other projects that are competing for priority right now. Next year, there's going to be water rate increase and a corresponding sewer rate decrease. The important thing about this increase and decrease is that it has a net zero impact on residents because each one offsets the other. We are planning to replace that clear well next year, so that will be a huge expense paid for out of the revolving loan fund that we get from IEPA. And on the note of good news, we have Lincolnwood water sales starting in November of 2019. Where residents will see some increases next year will be on charges for refuse. These will be outlined in greater detail at the November 12th meeting. But basically, in order to make the solid waste fund more solvent, we need to increase these fees to fully account for the cost of providing the service. That is the proposal so far. I'll let you take it away, Mr. Robkowitz.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that finishes up the operating budget presentation. Laura Biggs, the city engineer, is here to do an overview of the capital. I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if you wanted to do any questions at this point, or you wanted to wait till the conclusion of the capital presentation.
Let's go to Alderman Rainey because her light's on, and then we'll make a decision here.
In the past, do I recall that we supplemented some of the large SSA budgets?
Yes, we have. And the wonder of the closure of the Washington National TIF has largely made that unnecessary. So, as Hitesh mentioned, the taxing jurisdictions other than the city of Evanston are benefiting from the closure of the Washington National TIF. Much, if not all, of the SSA, the downtown SSA, is also benefiting from that. So they are going to see, fortunately, what was planned all along, which is that the increase in monies from the SSA will cover, I believe, all but $28,000. $15,000. So it's a significant decrease to the extra dollars that we have been providing to the downtown SSA for several years.
Because I'm looking at their budget, and it goes from $360 to $525,000 this year. Is that because of the termination?
Yes, obviously, as the manager, Bobko, mentioned that because of the Washington National, they kind of overlap some of the SSA4.
And so they benefited from it, I see.
Correct. And we still have a little bit cushion in there so that we capture any other increase in that area or the increased values. But I think our fair estimate is right around somewhere $500,000 in that tax levy.
And the SSA is expiring next year. And so they are having to go through a reauthorization process. And so the Downtown Evanston Association continues to work with consultants on the process there and looking at the process.
That's their issue. That
is their issue, not our issue.
Right.
That's okay. All right.
So, yeah, let's go ahead and we'll do the capital, and then we'll have a discussion up here.
Go right ahead.
Council members, my name's Laura Biggs. I'm the Bureau Chief of Capital Planning and Engineering. So I'm going to just go through a really brief summary of the capital improvement program. First, we have a larger than we normally do capital improvement program, but that's largely being driven by two projects, the Robert Crown project, which was approved last July, and the treated water storage project at the water utility is estimated to be about $20 million in construction. That is out to bid. We're actually receiving the bids October 30th, and we hope to start construction in early January. So this is a breakdown of the various funding sources for our capital improvement program. Quite a lot of our funding comes from general obligation bonds. However, you can see here there's generally a reduction that's occurring. That's largely because in the past we have budgeted far more than $9 million in general obligation bonds, and then we go through a really painful process right at the end to get it down to $9 million before we sell the bond. And so we are sort of predicting that process this year. there is likely to be, we put in 9.4 because it's entirely possible that one or two projects just may not move forward based on the normal attrition of projects. Otherwise, we can see there's this big lump here from the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. We actually have the treated water storage project and another project that's a sewer rehabilitation on Greenleaf that is that are proposed to be funded, and the IPA has put us on the intended use plan, so it's very likely we get that money. We actually have several other projects that are ready to go, so that if other people don't get their projects done, then we are a candidate for getting this overflow funding. No TIF projects this year, as some of our big TIF spending has been out of the Washington National TIF, which is closing. Otherwise, we have quite a bit from federal grants that largely has to do with the Central Street Bridge project. So as always, the process for how we determine projects is really pretty similar to the past. We do use a mix of consultant evaluations. We are currently are in the process. We've gotten the draft payment condition survey, but we haven't entirely reviewed it and met. So that will more be available for 2020 planning than it is for 2019. But we've used other consultant reports, and then we use a lot of the information we get from residents, whether it funnels up through 311 or the alderman. We utilize that information to determine where some of our biggest needs are, and then we look at maintenance needs provided by the staff. Per the direction we've gotten from city council members in the past, we are continuing with just trying to deal with our worst problems first, rather than trying to focus on geographically distributing everything equally or any other method. We just go to what are the worst problems once we get all the data together. And so I'm just going to go real briefly through some of our other, through the different sections of our CIP. The first being streets, water, main, sewer, other transportation projects. One of the most noticeable things about this section of the CIP is we actually get a lot of different funding sources that are not general obligation bonds. And so that means that we are able to spend quite a lot of money maintaining our street infrastructure. And I realize that at times it feels like we will never catch up to all the street infrastructure problems, but I suspect that's a problem that every city has. We actually do make a sizable investment between water, main, sewer, and street resurfacing every year. And some of our major projects that we have going on, we are in the process, or we just this evening approved at APW, and you'll have the opportunity to approve tonight the engineering services from Main Street from Maple to Hinman to start the phase 1 planning on that. Main Street Commons, we're in the process of doing design to start construction next year, and Howard Street, from basically the Target Access Drive over to Callan Avenue, we are working with the City of Chicago to coordinate that work and design. That will be in construction in 2020. And then we have our normal projects that we do. We are planning to use MFT funds again for street resurfacing. We use water fund money to do water main rehabilitation projects. We invest a significant amount to try to do 1% of our system a year, as water main has an estimated useful life of 100 years. And we try to coordinate that with street resurfacing so that we don't resurface a street and then go in the following year and tear it up to do a water main that has a maintenance history. So that is closely coordinated. This 30-inch downtown feeder main is the major feeder main, transmission main that serves the downtown area for drinking water. It is in okay condition, but it is starting to need rehabilitation, and it's a really large pipe to have problems on. That is a project that we would be seeking IEPA overflow funding for. That it's ready to go in construction. We may or may not get the money in 2019. If we don't, it's entirely likely that we'll get the money in 2020. The IEPA has actually been really good for us to work with. And then doing the Lincolnwood connection, that involves doing a meter vault and a pipe connection down by the South Standpipe at Oakton and Hartree in order to be able to move water to Lincolnwood.
Laura, we get a question for you, or a comment. Alderman Fisk.
Laura, the 30-inch downtown feeder main, that wasn't something that could have been paid for out of the Washington National TIF?
No, most of that is actually from the water plant to the downtown area, and even where it enters the downtown, it goes primarily on Sherman Avenue, cuts across on Emerson, and then goes down Benson, so it's not really within the TIF area.
Well, some of those projects don't need to be in the actual TIF, do they, as long as they serve the TIF?
That's true. I would say, though, that the timing was a challenge with the Washington National TIF expiring because we really didn't finish the design until just now. We've been working on it this year. Also, the amount of money that was available in the Washington National TIF for capital projects, we did end up capturing quite a lot of that for Fountain Square and also for doing Sherman Avenue paving, which we'll be getting under contract pretty soon, going a little bit north of Fountain Square all the way up to Church.
Okay. Does the TIF actually close in November? Is that the date, or is it
The
this
TIF
month?
closes in December 31st. However, you have a 12-month period to finish projects that are underway.
And there's no way we could scoot this at least part of this project in there?
I don't think so, but I also don't think that there's available funding anymore.
Okay. Oh.
Okay, thank you. Go on, Laura. Thank you.
We also have, in terms of some of our other transportation projects that we have underway, I think one of the most
I'm sorry, before you, Alderman Fisk just wanted to complete her thoughts.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I would just like more information on that, Hitesh, about...
Based on the estimates we have currently, we won't be left with any surplus in the Washington when we close at the end of the year.
One of the most noticeable things is something that council members have asked. We've done a lot of interventions on Ridge Avenue trying to deal with accidents at Lake and Ridge, and we're going to continue that with taking a look at the traffic signals along Ridge Avenue as you go further south, not really the Emerson Ridge Green Bay area, but going south towards Mulford to see if we can time them better and also if there are recommendations for how to improve the intersections. So we will be working towards that study this year. Our next section of the CIP is our park section. So this, you can see, is almost entirely funded by general obligation bonds, which means that it really competes from a lot of other types of projects. And I would say that this is one of the biggest gaps in funding we have in our CIP. We've developed a 5-year CIP by looking at all sections of our infrastructure, what we perceive as the known identified maintenance problems and needs, and then comparing it to what we're actually spending. We have about 75 parks, and the life of a park is around 15 to 25 years, and then it pretty much needs a rehabilitation. If you're going to have things like playground equipment and fencing and stuff, that all needs to be replaced on a fairly regular cycle. And so that would indicate that you would want to do about 3 parks a year as a full rehab, and we've been currently working on a schedule of doing 1 park as a full rehab every year, and then just trying to capture a couple of other maintenance problems that are ongoing. So this really is the section where we have the biggest maintenance, or the biggest gap in our funding. Some of the things we're looking at doing, we were able to use some reallocated CDBG funds that had been allocated to Foster Field but not been utilized by previous projects in order to replace a site perimeter fence around Foster Field. We can't really do any serious work at Foster Field beyond that because until Robert Crown's done, we can't take Foster Field out of service. So it's providing some fairly critical athletic facilities for us. We have a little bit of a shortage right now. Garden Park is moving into construction next year, and then the next park, the next worst rated park would be McCullough, and it's the biggest maintenance issue we have after Garden Park. So we're going to be moving into design on that one. Facilities, these numbers don't include Crown, and we actually are doing pretty well on funding facilities, but part of the funding that we're spending this year, we're making significant capital investment from the parking fund into our garages and parking lots. If you look at the individual projects and how they break down, we've really done a good job at addressing a lot of our really serious problems that could be a safety issue like electrical work or things like roof leaking where it's causing a lot of damage to buildings. And now we're sort of moving on to the next level of a lot of HVAC replacements. So what you see is life of HVAC is really, depending on this type of system you have, somewhere between 10 and 20 years. There hasn't really been a substantial investment in HVAC in any of our facilities for quite some time, and so there's just a lot of HVAC projects. They're either in the study phase or moving into design and construction. And then at the church, Maple and Sherman garages, there's a sealant that goes on the traffic lanes to protect the concrete called silane, and that sealant needs to be reapplied every 5 years. It's been 6 to 7 years since it's applied, so we have budgeted to replace the protective coating. We're also looking at the lighting upgrade in Sherman because the light fixtures are no longer available. There are actually some lights out in Sherman Avenue Garage because of that problem, and so we have set up a mock-up with new light fixtures that everybody on staff has agreed are good light fixtures, and so we're moving forward with that project into construction early next year once we get past the holiday shopping season. In terms of water treatment, the big project we have is our treated water storage replacement. That is a project that will be in construction about 20 months, and we're in the process of working with we'll get the bid packages in, and then we'll work with the IPA to finalize the loan documents. So that won't really be able to start until January. We've worked closely with Northwestern on this, and they've been really involved in doing the review because it is located under the parking lot. So I think we're in really good shape in terms of all the coordination, but it is going to be very impactful to their campus. So we'll have to work with them through the construction. In addition, we have another large project that kind of follows on to that. We have 3 intakes. One of them is smaller. It's 36 inches in diameter, like halfway out, about a half mile, and then it switches to 42 inches in diameter, the remaining half mile. And it really just doesn't have the capacity that it should. It's very hard to televise an intake. Also, it's extremely old. So I think that our intent is to replace that, and we're trying to do it on a certain schedule so that it can be incorporated into the water rates for the new users as well. Other than that, the filtration head house is a historic building. We're not entirely sure what was going to happen until we got all the new customers on board. We have all the new customers on board. The building is going to stay, and it is in need of some TLC in terms of tuck pointing and roof replacement, so there's money budgeted for that. And the last project I really want to point out is it's in our miscellaneous categories, just projects that don't fit in anywhere else, is we do have an emergency siren system that is on its last legs. It is functional at the moment, but no guarantees, and so we have plans to replace that siren system.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that is your proposed fiscal 2019 operating capital budget. Again, the public hearing for the budget is on Saturday, 9 o'clock, and then would anticipate council deliberations on the 29th, 12th, and 19th. So, Mr. Mayor, if there's any questions from the council, any additional budget memos you'd like, anything else, we would welcome that at this time. Otherwise, that concludes our presentation.
Can you just let the public know, I know this is really our first meeting, but there's already a lot of budget memos, like how many there are out there? Just
sure. So if folks go to our website, cityofevanston.org/budget, they will find a whole variety of interesting documents. They will find the proposed budget itself. They will find information about the Budget Act Budget Simulator. And Ms. Lewis-Lakin, how many folks have completed that process so far, approximately? So 150 residents have been through the Budget Act software, so we will have on Saturday a report to you of that. But if people are interested in doing it, I believe, Kate, it's open through Friday. People can do that, so there's a link to that. The Budget Balancing Worksheet. There's a link to a document called Why Consider Equity in Budgeting. Dr. Effiam will be here on Saturday to give her assessment based on some of the principles in that document. All all the various presentations, the budget calendar, the discussions that we've been having. There are 4 more of these discussions, 3 tomorrow, 8 a.m. at the Bagel Art, 6:15 Dempster, 4 p.m. at Starbucks, 1734 Sherman Avenue, 6 p.m. at Pope John XXIII School, which will be entirely in Spanish, and then Wednesday the 24th at Little Beans Cafe at 3:30. So all that information can be found cityofelvanston.org/budget.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you to the city staff for all the work that you've done on the budget and with the budget memos, and I'm sure there'll be many more that are requested. And just for the public, if you get into the budget memos, it really gets into the detail about some of these, either proposed revenue increases or changes to programs or the decrease. With that, we're going to go to Alderman Ruth Simmons and then Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you. I have, as we know, Gibbs Morrison is proposed to have a new operator, and I've worked very hard to come up with ways to keep it open and operating in a more efficient way. I've met with the department and identified additional revenue streams and opportunities to continue operating the building in a way that we should have to this point. We have invested a substantial amount of money in improvements. We have new improvements even coming now with public art. We have scheduled a ribbon cutting for the improvements, and my hope is that we will stay committed to a facility in a community that we all agreed is in need. I just want to be clear that I have always been committed to Gibbs Morrison and keeping it open, working since I've been on council at looking at ways to increase the programming, trying to work with the food vendor on ways to make adjustments to the menu to make it more appealing and more affordable to the community that it's in. And considering that we aren't closing or making this substantial adjustment to any other facilities in the city, I'm very uncomfortable with a proposal not to continue to be committed to this facility. So I'm asking, based on the opportunities to increase revenue, to improve the programming, and to be more strategic about supporting the success of that building, I'm asking that we take this off of the list as one item that I guess it's that we won't operate. I'm asking that we remove that and we work with purpose and integrity in giving the building the support that it needs. And I'd like to make a motion.
Second.
Okay. Alderman Braithwaite, and then we'll get Alderman Fisk.
So this is my, definitely in support of the Fifth Ward Alderman in terms of making the necessary adjustments to keep the center open, I think. And just listening to the comments today, we all realize that it's a tough budget season, but I think I would agree, it's difficult when we look citywide at the other facilities, and to even give any appearance that we would possibly close the center, I think does have a very negative impact on the community. So I'm going to be supportive of this and look forward to hearing the revenue ideas that you have worked on to come through during the budget process. But I do think it's important that we support you in this effort.
Thank you. Alderman Fisk and then Alderman Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. during our budget meeting with staff, it was Alderman Rainey, Alderman Ruth Simmons, and myself, and we had a very animated and very positive discussion about Gibbs Morrison, and I was pleasantly surprised to find out how the community and neighbors have embraced this facility and how many people are actually using it. So it's already identified within the community as a resource, and I'm very reluctant to take that away. It does seem to me that there are some adjustments that can be made to increase revenues, and I think that seemed to be really obvious to the three of us. So I'm very encouraged about the future of this, and want to do whatever I can to help it succeed. But I do think by minor adjustments we can attract a larger number of people who are actually coming there to dine and enjoy it. I would just see it as something almost that's a no-brainer.
Thank you. Can we just get a refresher from the city staff on why this was put there as a proposal? And then we'll go to Wilson.
Certainly. We have a $4.7 million deficit. As we looked at reductions in the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Department, we felt if there was one senator that could continue operating with some sort of contract operation, that this was the senator to do that. With that said, I agree with Alderman Ruth Simmons and the work that she has done with our Parks and Rec staff over the last few weeks, that there is another way. And so certainly from a staff perspective, we're committed to work with the aldermen to make this happen. But the cold reality of this budget is that difficult decisions, difficult recommendations have to be made. And the reason for this one was really that it was the one that we thought we could affect change with the least disruption. But again, let me reiterate, support Alderman Ruth Simmons, Mr. Hemingway, and their work that they've done over the last couple of weeks. And if the council chooses to take this off, we'll come back probably after the next couple of meetings with a revised budget balancing worksheet that will identify, we believe there's additional revenue that can be generated at the center, and then we'll also come up with other solutions to balance it out.
So what was the proposed was there a proposed savings on this if you somehow converted this?
Well, what we did is we took the revenue minus the expenditures for staffing, and that was budget staff about $171,000. So by taking it off the budget balancing worksheet, then that is the amount of money that we need to identify. Okay. And again, with the discussions that Alderman Ruth Simmons and Mr. Hemingway have already had, we have found a good deal of that. And again, once the dust clears after the next week or so, we'll come back with a full plan.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Alderman Wilson and then Alderman Fleming.
And I agree that we should be certainly supportive of Alderman Ruth Simmons' efforts here. The one thing I don't feel comfortable with, though, is that I think we could kind of owe it to the community personally to not take things off the table at this juncture. It sounds like there's some really great ideas here, but I think, I didn't see a budget memo. If there was one in here, I didn't see it. I saw some modest amount of information. But I think we should include the information and the work that's been done in these memos. I don't want to give the impression that any given, these are all really, every single cut is a really hard cut. So there's pretty much, I can't think of a single thing on here that I don't feel really poorly about doing. We heard a lot of really, impassioned pleas from a lot of community members about a lot of different things. So I don't want to just, even though it's not true, I don't want to give the impression that one thing is more important than the other. And I'm just fearful that taking anything off the table, this early in the process, is likely to lead to that perception.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Alderman Fleming, and then Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Thank you. So I think for me, that's a little, I understand what you're saying, Alderman Wilson. I think for me, this is a little different because when I looked at kind of the history of Gibbs Morrison, obviously I wasn't on council then, but if I'm correct, it never really had a program budget. So we put a program space there, without a program budget. So I think we have a responsibility to, before we consider something not successful to properly support it so it can be successful. And if I'm correct in that, then that, to me is just a little bit of a failure on our part, and we ought to establish this center as one that can thrive. And then if we see next year that, in spite of all the best intentions, it's not working, then that's a different conversation. Also, I guess I just want to throw out there that I support this, but I encourage everyone to talk to the staff that have been, I guess, so-called terminated there. I'm not sure what we call that when they've been told that their job might be terminated, because I understand that for any staff will cause a lot of anxiety. And so now if we're, looking to pull this off the budget, I would just hope we have a conversation with them so that we, one, don't particularly lose valuable staff who are maybe going to look for another employment thinking they don't have it, or that they're just clear what this means for them moving forward, because people obviously are dependent on paychecks, and we have to be responsible employers in that way.
Great. Thank you, Alderman Fleming, Alderman Ruth Simmons, and then Alderman Braithwaite.
No comment right now.
Okay, Alderman Braithwaite.
I'll call the question.
Okay. Seeing no more lights, all in favor of? Excuse me, I guess it is. So, okay, City Clerk, could you take the roll, please?
Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson.
And I'm saying no, but I just want it clear that it's because of the timing, not necessarily the program.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Sufferton. Alderman Ravel. Alderman Rainey. Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Okay. The motion passes 7-2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I also wanted to just seek clarification based on some of the comments that we've heard this evening. Several months ago, the City Council directed the City Manager to remove the youth and young adult division off of the priority-based budgeting. And so seeing that this is not a budget item, I think that this request should be relatively easy. And again, based on the comments that we've heard this evening, I don't think I need to repeat any of them. My recommendation is, I don't even know why I'm making the recommendation, but I just want to make it clear to our citizens, and I'll say it again, there's a very high level of anxiety around these services. And this isn't a park, this isn't the arts, it's literally dealing with the violence that exists in our community. And I think 3 years ago, when the violence, when we saw the impact citywide, we really realized how important it is that we keep this department intact. And so my motion is to hold any discussions about reorganizing until after the budget is adopted. And if there is to be a reorganization, that what we should have done is to involve communication directly with the staff, as well as members of council that pay attention to these target areas, and if need be, even a broader community discussion. So my motion is to hold any reorganization until after the budget season, and that if there is going to be a reorganization, that it is put into the budget with proper resources.
Second.
Okay, we've got Alderman Rainey and then Alderman Wilson.
I think it's. No, I don't want to speak to that, but I can't speak to that right now. But going forward, once we resolve that, as a council, we have an obligation immediately to go to the issue of revenue. How are we going to support these two issues that we are leaving in place?
I agree, 100%.
Okay, Alderman Wilson.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it's fully funded, so it's not a cut in the budget. So there's that. I mean, I think, a motion to change a policy, I don't think that's a thing. So, I mean, it's not on the agenda, and it's not in the budget, so I'm not really sure that that's a proper motion. So I would just call that, ask for guidance from the council on...
Good evening. City Attorney Michelle Mason-Cup. Correct. There's nothing before you, a motion or something on the agenda for a reminder to come back to an item. It sounds like Alderman Rainey is just making a suggestion. Is that accurate?
Well, I think Alderman Braithwaite was making a motion.
I think then I can.
His motion.
I mean, I'll just call it personal privilege. A few months ago, we made a very clear direction to our city manager not to touch the program. And so since then, we've had changes, we've had people come up, and there's no memo in the budget. There's nothing to even indicate that the recommendation that's being made was. I mean, I'm struggling to find the words other than to just make it clear that we don't touch this program that goes back to my original motion until after the budget season. It's a clarification.
All right, so that was a motion. It was seconded, and we've got several lights on. City Manager Bob Coyds.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I notified you of an intent to make some staffing changes, which is within my right as city manager. I've heard the discussion this evening. I'm certainly dismayed by this. I'm dismayed. The intent was to talk with the employees involved. One employee chose to reach out to the community through social media prior to that discussion. But the only idea behind a reorganization was a promotion. If the council is not interested in that, then I will make other changes without that promotion, which is within my right as city manager. So the only issue would have been a promotion of an employee. If the council chooses not to consider that as part of the reorganization plan that's in Parks and Recreation, then we'll make other staffing changes without that reorganization.
Okay, I've got Alderman Nguyen, then Wilson, then Fisk, then Fleming.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, we made it very, very clear back in July when we took the funding issue off the table that we were fully funding the youth and young and adult programs that we provide in the city, and we provide a number of them, and the council voted unanimously for that. I've spoken to the staff involved in this and been very, very clear that I would not support any cut in funding. And that has not been proposed. What Alderman Braithwaite, what you're suggesting is that we take over the city manager's job, and I don't believe that is the purview of the city council. Our purview is to make the policy, and our city manager is to carry out that policy. And I'm not prepared tonight to vote yes on something that I consider a management decision that would require much further discussion by the City Council. We removed the funding from the whole budget discussion. I think every single one of us has expressed our tremendous support for these programs and recognize the value that they have in this community and their power and effect. We've heard all of the testimony. Every single one of us knows people who have benefited from these things, but I'm not going to support the motion.
Thank you, Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson, then Alderman Fisk, and then Fleming.
Right, and Alderman Nguyen, it's a fully funded program. We previously gave the city manager's office a very, very clear directive. Then, in addition to a program that was very effective and working very well, and maintained our full support, we also wanted to develop and enhance the workforce development. And it seemed to me and I think we were all advised of this ahead of time, but to then...
Sorry, just a point of clarification. What were you advised of ahead of time?
I think I was told that there were going to be changes in this department. I don't think I had all the details.
By whom?
City manager.
Okay.
Okay. So did you not know anything about this?
I didn't hear anything until I was informed by the director of the department 24 hours before the employee was notified. So I'm glad that you had a conversation. I wish I had had the courtesy of a conversation. But Alderman Simmons, were you consulted? Mayor, were you consulted?
But Alderman Nguyen's very clear and correct point is it's not our job to micromanage the city manager. And when he does something, it's not our job to adopt what social... We can't govern by social media because a lot of people get something wrong on social media. We heard a lot of people here saying, please don't cut this program. Please don't cut this program. I don't know how many people said that. We're not cutting this program. But again, we're getting sucked into this trap where, I said this when we were having a conversation, the group of us before. As community leaders, sometimes we have a choice where we have to either tell people what they want to hear or tell people what they need to hear. And we have to be honest with them. But the city manager's job is to manage the employees, and he either does it or doesn't do it. Some people like how he does things. Some people don't like how he does things. I haven't agreed with everything he's done over the years. I've voiced my opinions, and then you move on. But that's the job. I'm not hired to micromanage the city manager. I'm not elected to do that, and none of the rest of us are elected to do that. So it would be an extremely slippery slope, and good luck finding anybody who'd want to work here if we're going to start doing things like that. It's not appropriate, and I understand your concern, and I understand the staff's concerns, but these are an ongoing conversation. These aren't, the city council is going to, again, it goes back to what I said before about nobody's more special than somebody else. We should be treating people equally. Okay, and I don't want to create the impression that we're singling people out for special treatment as a council. We hear people in the community come up and blame us and the city manager for doing exactly what I think it would be perceived that we would be doing if we went along with that.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. We got Alderman Fisk and then Alderman Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hear what you're saying, but I do think there's confusion out in the community. I mean, the word gets out and it moves around the community. Some people misinterpret it. Some people don't understand. Some people don't follow what we do up here all the time. And I think that's a good thing. I hope they're doing something much more fun than sitting through our budget discussions, although they're very important. So I'm glad everybody's paying attention tonight. But Mr. City Manager, I think it would be really helpful, and I don't see anything negative in this. I think it would be really helpful when there clearly is confusion that we take a moment and, just ask you to explain your rationale, and because I don't believe there's anything negative in what you're thinking. I do think that it can be viewed as a promotion. I think it can be viewed in a lot of different ways that are more positive. And I do believe that that's what you intend, but things get confused. And so when we see the confusion, the only thing that we can do is stop and say, wait, we'll explain one more time. So, Mr. City Manager, I'd love to hear you go through your thoughts.
Go ahead.
As Alderman Braithwaite said, and I shared with the City Council in an email a few weeks ago, the Council made a very compelling argument to leave the Youth and Young Adult Division as is, because it does extraordinary work. For those of you who have been on the council for a little while, you will recall what our youth outreach looked like prior to Mr. Brown's hiring. It was disjointed. It was not something that was in any way a cohesive manner. Since then, we've made a number of excellent hires. Nate Norman, who is responsible for the outreach team on a day-to-day basis, outstanding young individual. Portia Davis, another outstanding young individual who has done the Summer Youth Employment Program. So those two are the day-to-day leadership of that program. And so in reviewing the City Council's goals and as we prepared the budget, it was clear to me that we were certainly lacking in one area, and that was a broader program for workforce development. There are many Evanston residents of all ages who are not working at a level that they would like to work. They're not working at jobs that are meaningful and productive and pay a wage that will help support them and their family. So in talking with both Mr. Hemingway and Johanna Leonard, our Community Development Director, it was clear to me that we needed to make a change in order to have a single staff person focused on workforce development. Mr. Brown is certainly a staff member who brings great skills and ability with that, and he's also built an outstanding team. And so I went to Mr. Hemingway and said, who can take over leadership of this team, who has also done excellent work, and we came up with Ken Cherry. Mr. Cherry has primary responsibilities at Fleetwood-Jourdain Center, already deals with a whole variety of community issues, and so Mr. Hemingway, Ms. Leonard, and I came up with a plan to leave the youth and young adult program intact, leave all of the workers that work diligently every day in the community, and to promote Mr. Brown into a position in the community development department that would have the luxury of time to focus on workforce development programs. Mayor Haggerty, in his State of the City address this past spring, really had a clarion call to this community, saying that workforce development was one of the single greatest priorities we had as a community. And in reflection, as your city manager, I felt we weren't doing the work that we needed to do. And so, as part of a larger reorganization of the department, proposed that we would move forward with this change. So if the council's authority here would be the shifting of the position from Parks and Recreation to Community Development, the creation of a new manager position that would be on par with the other division managers within Community Development, Gary Gertis, Sarah Flax, Paul Zalmazak. And so from my perspective, that promotion requires the City Council's authority to do that. The reorganization of staff does not. But again, the impetus behind this was to take a very skilled staff member in Mr. Brown and expand his capacities, expand his work to create programs that we're just not copying. We have a great skill of copying programs other communities do. I think Mr. Brown is capable of creating programs that will be singular to this community, and others will follow us. Because while we do well, certainly with young adults, we do not do well with older adults. And so this would be an opportunity to do that. Mr. Brown's new position would have access to the existing staff. He would also be challenged to find new resources and work with other community organizations. So again, my sense is that as part of the reorganization, I would need the council's concurrence. However, the shift of Mr. Brown to other responsibilities and to have Mr. Cherry, Mr. Nathan, and Ms. Davis carry on would be the intent. So that's sort of the longer version. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bobkowitz. Alderman Fleming and then Alderman Braithwaite.
So here's my concern. We had the community that came up the first time about this program. We gave a direction. We have the community coming up this time about this program. I think that Alderman Fisk is right. There's lots of confusion. What I heard people say tonight was keep the program intact, not necessarily, don't take the budget away or anything else. And I understand that we're having a budget discussion, but in the $7 million that we have to, balance or find elsewhere, there are lots of things that are stressing our community. And I think Alderman Braithwaite's request that we would leave this program intact until we get through the budget discussion, have a bigger conversation about what the impact is or can be, or what the vision is not invalid. I think there is, in my opinion, no reason to cause more alarm in a city when people are hear about the fire station and about any given program that they care about. Why would we use that same time to cause more angst for community members that I think is undue? I don't want to get into the personnel matters of who gets to decide, and I'm not sure that that's where Alderman Braithwaite is going. But I do think we have community members who we largely don't see at normal community meetings coming out to talk about this program and their concern about what they think is going to be a change of service. So instead of doing something that appears to be hasty in the community at a time when they're also going to take other cuts potentially just through the budget process, it makes sense to serve our community in a more thoughtful and a more what word am I looking for? Well, anyway, in a more thoughtful way that allows them and allows us time to get through these budget discussions, not be distracted with people coming to talk about things that aren't necessarily budget items, but to table this till we have a bigger discussion. I am on the City School Liaison Committee. I'm on the Young Adult Advisory, whatever all the committees are. I, like Alderman Braithwaite, did not hear about that, which I'm not here saying I have to make a decision on everything, but I think if we have committees that are geared towards youth, that talk about schools, that talk about crime and so on, if this is a team that was put together to address those issues, in my mind, it does make sense to have a more thorough discussion so that everyone understands what is happening, what the proposal is, what the impacts are, and we can clearly articulate that to people who are clearly concerned about it. Again, I think, the ask is that we keep it as is until we get through the budget and can have a bigger discussion about it and have a clear message for our community. I understand Alderman Wilson's point about one thing being more important than the other. And what I'm saying here is the health and the trust of our community is very important. It makes no sense to make people come up here for the next, I don't know how many weeks, to plead their case for a program when we can just leave it as is.
Yep. Thank you, Alderman Fleming. Alderman Braithwaite?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you very much, Alderman Fleming. I think I've said this before regarding the city manager, that I have blind spots. I am not an expert in preservation or the arts. But the things that I'm passionate about when it comes to our youth, seniors, and people of color, I do pay close attention to. And I think this is one of those areas that my passions overlap with your blind spots. And I think if you listened to the comments from the community, rather than dig your heels in, you would pause and just wait. And if I'm not being clear, wait until after the budget season so there's a well thought out plan so that the community that I represent accepts it. And right now, I have yet to hear from anyone from my community that's embracing this, or the larger community. So I think I don't see this being unreasonable. I see this consistent with the motion that was made several months ago. And I'm confused by the fact that we're even arguing about this, to be honest.
And Alderman Braithwaite, I am too.
Okay.
I look at the powers and authorities that you have all given me directly, indirectly, certainly through the Evanston City Code. I am asked to administer an organization. I have before you a budget that has multiple layoffs, has multiple
We're not talking
issues.
about budget right now. We're just talking simple programming.
Sure. And I guess I'm just, I'm disappointed that the credibility that I have gained in this particular area alone, that I have worked very diligently to build resources. If you all recall, there have been many budgets where this program has been the only program to gain resources. Not the police department, not the fire department. But I hear all what you're saying. And so my quandary is to be thoughtful in this area. And certainly this is the first evening of budget discussions. I think there's opportunities for additional discussion with this. I'm perfectly happy to have this be a management decision only that requires no budget authority. That's not my preference. I think that there's a reorganization would make this a better program. But certainly, if the council would like to revisit this as we are continuing through the budget process, my guess is we'll have several more discussions. But the bottom line here, Mayor Haggerty and members of the council, is that the City Council said workforce development was one of your handful of goals. And so this is my recommendation to staff, just as I have made recommendations to you on every other municipal service and the allocation of those resources, and my rightful role as your city manager to put the right people in those right places. And I think I have a 9-year track record of that. And I think certainly in this area, we've only seen success. So, Mr. Mayor, I guess I look to you and the council for further direction.
Okay, I've got a couple more people that want to talk, and then we've got a motion and a second. So Alderman Fleming and then Alderman Wilson.
So I have a just quick question, because you just mentioned take this out of the budget authority. So when I'm looking at the budget, and I know we've said this, several people have said this isn't a budget issue. Can you just explain to me what you mean by that? I'm seeing a slight budget change, but are you saying in the new workforce development department, or whatever you would term it, that there is a new budget allocation. How is this? Because I'm hearing you say, take this out of the budget authority, but I'm hearing Alderman Nguyen saying this isn't a budget issue. I don't see a huge change on the budget line item. So can you please explain that point to me?
Well, Alderman Fleming, members of the council, there is a large dollar amount for a Parks and Recreation reorganization. So we are still working with one additional staff member who is contemplating a retirement. That has not yet been finalized. So the thought was that a portion of funds saved from that would be used to move this position to community development. If it's the council's wish not to include that in the budget, then we'll make staffing changes within the existing budget that's allocated for youth and young adult.
So then that's fine, but I think that again is part of the confusion, because here I sit with, gazillion pages in front of me, and I again, I'm not a manager, but I think that's some of the clarity that I would like to know more about, because when you say, there's a budget authority piece, I'm not thinking of these transfers, which is fine. I'm more along the lines with Alderman Nguyen, where I don't see a budget line item, a new budget line item. And so I think, again, this is some confusion. And so, again, to not cause more tension and stress in our community, it might be worth fleshing that all out when you decide if and when there's money and if and how to spend it. Then that's a broader introduction to, it's a better introduction to the community to lay out exactly what the new plan is.
And again, my initial thought was that rewarding an outstanding employee with a small promotion was not going to cause the ruckus that it's caused. And so if we need to make the adjustments within the existing staffing framework, we can do that, and there would be no budget. So I
don't think anyone is. I think you're jumping too far. I don't think anyone is questioning a promotion. I think people are looking for clarity. Okay. I think obviously there's some
and perhaps
confusion here. There's some confusion in the
a memo separate from a budget memo on the subject might be helpful, and we can prepare that over the next week or so, and we can share that with the council. And I'm happy to meet individually with folks, because if we can narrow it down to this in a shifting of resources that is under my jurisdiction, then we don't have to talk about this any further. I had just wanted some additional resources to make that promotion, but that doesn't need to happen. But I can put this all in a budget memo.
I think if I could have some clarity, that would be great.
Certainly.
I think if we could not. Again, we've taken a lot of time already. If we could not use the budget cycle to do that in terms of getting that clarity, that would be great.
And so I can prepare something off agenda over the next week or so, and we don't have to have this discussion at the council at this point.
But I think it'll continue to be a discussion as long as we have residents coming out and voicing concern. So my concern only echoes the comments that I heard from the floor. And so they will keep coming until there's clarity. And I think that there should be a broader discussion with the members of council that pay attention to these issues and the impacted areas. I'm concerned how the reorganization is going to impact the residents in my ward and on the west end and on the south end of Evanston. Before I agree to anything. Well, thank you. And it started before me with Alderman Holmes as well as Alderman Jean-Baptiste, as we all know.
But the issue of those people in the second ward that don't have jobs, those people over 25 that don't have jobs, so that's the inspiration to say, as the city of Evanston, one of the council's goals, let's do it. Let's take a staff member that has lots of experience in this and put them to work in this. That was the incentive. So
why don't we just call? I mean, we've got a motion in a second. Why don't we just call the vote and see I would say as an advisory, again, our city manager has something, but I think it would be helpful for him to see. The motion
be restated, please.
Alderman Braithwaite, why don't you restate
it? It's really seeking clarity around the reorg. My recommendation is that you hold off on any reclassification of employees until after the budget season, when it is clear what resources are going to be put in place. And I think before that should happen, out of respect for the residents who have come up, as well as the residents in my ward, that there's a broader discussion about, I want to understand how this reorganization is going to impact our residents. And so that's it. Okay. I mean, imagine that. We're going to stop and listen to the residents who feel that they're most impacted by this change.
Okay, is there a second to that? Cicely? Alderman Fleming? Okay. Can we just go? I'm just worried. We got a lot of things to cover. I feel like everybody's had a lot of opportunity to talk. Can we just take a quick vote on this? Just advisory.
Alderman Fisk.
I'm sorry. It's
a point of it's not.
Yeah, it's not
a motion. It's not.
right?
It's not on the agenda. So I think the city manager probably has clear direction, and then why?
In the context of the budget, it is on the agenda, and I think his motion goes to monies being moved. So I think it is a valid motion that could be voted on, and by roll call.
Can I interject
yes,
for a second?
please, City Attorney.
So, to me, you're really getting to a managerial issue. This is Illinois Municipal Code. You're really striking on the city code. This is whether or not you have a city manager form of government. He proposed a staff issue, and now you're mingling the two, and I am frankly confused what is before you. This is not on the agenda. This is not a budget issue. It sounds like you're challenging his ability to be a manager and make that decision.
Well, let's have some more conversation. We got more lights on up here. How about you, Alderman Fisk, and then we'll go to Alderman Wilson, then Braithwaite.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I love my colleague. He's just a really good guy. Didn't understand the motion at all.
Yeah,
I mean, okay,
we're in a weird space.
Well, here
and I didn't cause it.
No one's saying anybody caused it. I mean, we're just, I think that city manager has outlined a process going forward. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you're absolutely right that the community doesn't know what's going on. We haven't done a good job of explaining what's going on. There's some things that I heard tonight that I was hearing that were relatively new, although the city manager and I met this afternoon and he told me basically the same things because I asked. But now hopefully the word is going to get out in the community of what it is that he's actually proposing, and the community will have a chance to react to that. And he's already agreed to do that. So I think that's a good thing. And I do think that it being part of the budget discussion is only making it really, really confusing. So I'm satisfied with that, as long as we make it very specific to this job, that we're not micromanaging the city manager and with all the open positions. I want it to be very specific to this job, and I do want a date when this is coming back to us. I want to know when that will be, because I think this is important, and I do think that the whole the workforce question is a great, huge missing piece of what we need in our community that is attached to a lot of broader issues, mental health, affordable housing, all sorts of things that we're not addressing in the way that we could be. So, that said, I hope that we can hear a little bit more from the city manager about when we might expect further action on this and how he envisions the council being. Is this going to come back to us as a special order of business? Is it going to go to Human Services? Is it going to where's it going to go? And what's the plan going forward? Because otherwise, I mean, I would support the motion, although I'd ask you to clarify it a little bit more. No, I understand. I'm just trying not. I'm just confusing myself now. So.
All right, Alderman Wilson.
I agree with Alderman Fisk. I don't think it's something, it doesn't require a vote. I think the point has been made. A reference at the call of the wards could put this on an agenda, and we could talk about the program more specifically and get all the clarity that we would want. But it's also, I think it's important to note and remember, and part of our job to let people know, these are programs that have been developed recently under the leadership of the city manager and the team that he's put together, and with the support and funding from the council. So these are programs that we have supported and nurtured and continue to do so. So the hard part for me is to hear people say Some of the, most of the comments tonight were constructive and thoughtful, but some of the comments were clearly based on incorrect information, resulting in very angry comments and thoughts. So, again, it goes back to that idea that you can't completely govern addressing everything that somebody gets from social media. But if you know the person, or I know somebody, I'll call them or I'll talk to them. That's part of the job. Just reach out to people and let the ones who clearly have a misunderstanding know what's going on. But yeah, let's make the reference, get it on an agenda. Let's talk about the program more fully. And we've made great progress over the years. We've done, and Kevin and the economic development team and community development have really come up with some outstanding and creative things. I want to pursue that further. I want to pursue that aggressively, because that's what's impactful. The workforce development is the impactful thing. We talk about affordable housing. The problem is not that the housing's not affordable. The problem is that people don't make enough money. So,
we got Alderman Braithwaite, then Alderman Ruth Simmons.
I'll pass.
Okay, Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Thank you. Just to support Alderman Fisk's point in a clear communication to the community on when and how we'll get an understanding of any sort of impact, I think is my biggest concern, that these services are not interrupted, that this is a way to enhance the great work that's being done already, but the community must know, because obviously they're misinformed, and if you could give us a clear understanding of how and when and what that process will be like. Can it be a community meeting where the org chart is shown and impact or lack thereof is explained? That would be helpful, and it's necessary for us to respond to the residents that are concerned.
And Mr. Mayor, Alderman Ruth Simmons, what I'd like to propose is perhaps come back on the 12th with an agenda item with all the information that Alderman Ruth Simmons just asked for. I think she did an excellent job of summarizing this, and certainly all that information is there and available. We'll have appropriate staff. I mean, I think it's important to hear from Mr. Nathan and Ms. Davis and Mr. Cherry, Parks and Rec Director, Ms. Leonard, as well as other staff to talk about this. So, Mr. Mayor, I know there's a motion on the floor. I don't want to muddy things further.
Right.
No, I think
I do want to withdraw. I think we're finally getting to the point of my passion, and that is having a discussion that involves the staff. And I just want to make sure that when you come back with your report, that it includes the numbers from the Mayor's Summer Employment Program, the Years of Growth, includes the information and the partnership with Northwestern, as well as all the other community partners. Because what I'm looking for is an understanding of how something that's working so well is going to be better with what people have described as dismantling it. So that's the big burning question.
And there is no dismantling. So I'm happy to detail that in detail and show, hopefully, what, as Alderman Fisk has said, what are we missing? What haven't we done, and what will we be able to do? So, Mr. Mayor, if that's all right, we'll come back on November 12th.
That is
with that information.
Perfect. Alderman Fleming.
Just for clarification, since people are paying attention, how will the program go from now until August the 12th? Will it stay
there
as
is
it
no change, and there's never been. I mean, so
but hold on, there is no change from the email you sent us, or there is no change from before the email.
We will continue. We'll stop. We've been working with Mr.
Brown,
Mr. Brown, on the creation of this new position. We'll stop doing that. We were working on a job description and all of that. That'll, I guess, cease at this point. We'll come back with where we're at currently.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other items on the budget people like to talk about? Okay, seeing no lights, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Alderman Ruth Simmons, can you take us through M1 and APW, please?
Okay, thank you. Yes, A1 for action, payroll.
Can you start with M1?
Oh, I apologize. M1 for action, approval of minutes of the regular city council meeting of October 8, 2018 and October 15, 2018. A1 for action, payroll, September 17, through September 30th, 2018, in the amount of $2,845,633.96. Bills list October 23rd, 2018, in the amount of $2,298,931.21. For action, A2, credit card activity not including Amazon purchases, period ending August 26, 2018, $194,498.95. A3 is for action.
Take that off.
A4, third quarter financial report for fiscal year 2018. Staff recommends City Council accept and place on file the third quarter financial report. A5 is for action. Staff recommends that City Council authorize the City Manager to execute a contract with Patrick Engineering to provide engineering services for the Main Street Improvement Project between Maple Avenue and Hinman. At this time, staff recommends award of only the initial portion of the project, Phase 1, preliminary engineering, and the amount of $363,738. This project will be funded from the city's capital improvement fund. A6 is for action. Staff recommends City Council authorize the City Manager to approve change order number 1 to contract for the water treatment plant door renovation with construction consulting and disbursement services. This change order includes a time extension for 75 days, changing the completion date from September 15th to November 29th. There is no cost increase associated with this change order. A7 is for action. Staff recommends City Council adoption of Resolution 97R18, authorizing the City Manager to execute a 6-month extension of the Comcast Cable Television franchise agreement with Comcast. The existing agreement expires October 24, 2018. A new franchise agreement will be negotiated for a longer term in 2019. A8 is for action. Staff recommends City Council adoption of Resolution 79R18, authorizing the City Manager to negotiate and execute a parking agreement with YOU, located at 1911 Church Street, for the usage of their parking lot for patrons using the Gibbs Morrison Cultural Center and businesses in the Church Dodge corridor. Funding will be from the Gibbs Morrison Building Maintenance Material Fund, which has an allocation of $2,000. Staff projects an expense of approximately $500 yearly for fall cleanup and the landscaping. For action, A9 is for action. The Parks and this is a revision. The Parks, Recreation and Community Services Board recommend adoption of Resolution 81R18, naming the portion of Pittner are between Dempster Street and Greenwood Street with the honorary street sign Pierre Jean Paul Way. Okay, it's for action. A10 is for action. Staff recommends City Council adoption of Resolution 98R18, authorizing the City Manager to execute a partnership agreement with the Ridgeville Park District for the continuation of the middle school after school program at Cayman East Fieldhouse site. Ridgeville Park District is donating $12,000 for operational expenses and additional in-kind services for the program. A11 is for action. Staff recommends City Council adoption of Resolution 80R18, a resolution in support of the City of Evanston and School District 65 Safe Routes to School program. The City of Evanston seeks to obtain funding in support of Safe Routes to School program initiative. A12 is we're asking for a suspension of the rules and for action. Staff recommends City Council adoption ordinance 114-018, authorizing the City Manager to negotiate a 3-year lease with Northwest Center Against Sexual Abuse for office space in the Lorraine H. Morton Civic Center at the monthly rate of $577.50 for an annual rent of $6,930. A13 is for action. Staff recommends City Council adoption of Ordinance 110-018, dissolving the Washington National Tax Increment Finance District effective December 31st, 2018. As part of this closure, the city is required to officially notify all taxing districts regarding this dissolution and any distribution thereof of remaining funds in the TIF. A14 is for action. Staff recommends City Council adoption Ordinance 116-018, authorizing the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the Chicago Transit Authority for the modernization of the CTA Purple Line in Evanston, with a focus on support for Davis Street CTA station, with a local match contribution from the Washington National TIF. This is a follow-up action to the execution of a memorandum of understanding between City of Evanston and CTA in June of 2018.
Great, thank you, Alderman Ruth Simmons. Alderman Wilson, can you take us through planning and development?
Thank you. Item P1, Ordinance 111-018, granting major variations at 2415 Wade Street in the R2 single-family residential zoning district.
I need to pull that off.
So that's off the consent.
And sorry, one correction. For AMPW for 110-018, I forgot to remind Alderman Simmons, that just needs to be pulled off because it needs a roll call vote to dissolve the TIF.
Okay.
Thank you.
Which one? That's A what?
It's A13.
A13. Okay, thank you.
All right, so, and also P1 is off the consent. And P2, Ordinance 119-018, granting landmark status to the building and lot of record at 2010 Dewey Avenue. The Preservation Commission and city staff are recommending approval of Ordinance 119-018, designating 2010 Dewey Avenue, the building and the lot, as an Evanston landmark. That is for action.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
City Clerk, can you take the roll, please?
If we're doing a roll call, did we need to pull the other?
Sorry?
Alderman Fisk? Yes. Alderman Braithwaite?
Yep.
Alderman Nguyen?
Aye.
Alderman Fleming? I'm sorry. Alderman Wilson? Alderman Ruth Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin? Alderman Ravel? Alderman Rainey? And Alderman Fleming.
Okay, consent agenda passes the City Council on a 9-0 vote. Now we're going to move to the items that were taken off. Alderman Ruth Simmons, can you take us through A3 and then A13?
Oh, A3. A3, Amazon credit card activity period ending August 26, 2018, in the amount of $7,410.26. This is for action.
Is there a second?
Second.
City Clerk, can you take the roll, please?
Alderman Fisk?
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen? Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Ruth Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin? Alderman Ravel? Alderman Rainey? Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
All right, so A3 passes 8-0 with Alderman Suffredin abstaining. A13, Alderman Ruth Simmons?
A13, staff recommends City Council adoption of Ordinance 110-018, dissolving the Washington National Tax Increment Finance District effective December 31st, 2018. As part of this closure, the city is required to officially notify all taxing districts regarding the dissolution and any distribution thereof of remaining funds in the TIF. This is for action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seeing no lights, the City Clerk, can you take the roll, please?
Alderman Fisk? Alderman Braithwaite?
I think that was an aye on Alderman.
Alderman Nguyen? Aye. Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Ruth Simmons?
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin? Alderman Ravel? Alderman Rainey? Aye. Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
All right, A13 passes the City Council on a 9-0 vote. Alderman Wilson, can you take us through P1?
Item P1, Ordinance 111-018, granting major variations at 2415 Wade Street in the R2 single-family residential zoning district. The Zoning Board of Appeals and staff recommend approval of the ordinance authorizing major variations for building lot coverage of 44.3%, a 19.8-foot front yard setback, a 0-foot west interior side yard setback, and a 2.9-foot east interior side yard setback. Also to provide one off-street parking space in order to construct additions to the existing single-family residence. That is for action.
Is there a second? Any discussion on this item? Okay, City Clerk, could you take the roll on P1?
Alderman Fisk? Alderman Braithwaite? Aye. Alderman Nguyen? Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Ruth Simmons?
I abstain.
Alderman Suffredin? Alderman Ravel? Alderman Rainey? Alderman Fleming.
All All right, P1 passes the City Council on an 8-0 vote with Alderman Ruth Simmons abstaining. Call the wards. Alderman Fisk?
No report.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank you, Mayor Haggerty, and the members of the community that came out to celebrate Mr. Jean-Pierre and his many, many contributions to the city of Evanston this past Saturday at the street naming. So thank you,
That was a great time. Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, I want to remind everyone of the Third Ward Town Hall meeting this coming Thursday evening at October 25th at Lincoln School from 7 to 8:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Alderman Ruth Simmons?
Thank you. I'd just like to encourage the residents of the Fifth Ward to come to our budget hearings on this Saturday. What time is it? 9 a.m. in this room, right here, in the council chambers.
Thank you, Alderman Severna. Alderman Ravel? Alderman Rainey?
Thanks to everybody, especially the city manager and people who came out to the 2 budget meetings in the 8th Ward, and also to the neighborhood meeting. And I have a request of our staff and city manager. I know we're not able to campaign for our transfer tax issue on the ballot, but we need to say what our transfer tax stamp referendum is. And there is some horrible, horrible advertising out that is totally, absolutely, positively not what our transfer tax stamp referendum is going to do. And I think if we just post what the referendum says, it's clear as day. It's a very simple referendum. And people are saying things like, a very smart person said to me, "Oh my God, it's the first home I ever bought, and now I'm going to be taxed forever." I mean, they really. I mean, a small home probably costs $300,000.
Not even going to be.
This card is so big. I just want to say we have to do something. We just have to say what it says.
All right.
Maybe our press can say what it is. I don't want to advertise. I don't want to argue for it. Just want to say what it is.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey.
We can say what it is. We can say what it is. I'm just saying what it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Alderman Fleming?
I'm not saying you should vote for it. I'm saying what it is.
Got it. Alderman Rainey. Alderman Fleming.
I'd also like to say what it is. I got the postcard too. 3 announcements. So 1, thank you to the 9th Ward residents who came to speak up tonight for the things that I know we have a very active community. So also to the 9th Ward residents, we are having a community budget meeting. It is Wednesday this week at 3:30 at Little Beans. So please stop by and talk to the city manager staff. You can have kind of a one-on-one or whoever's there with your budget questions. Also on Thursday, the 25th, so this Thursday at 7 p.m., we will be having a ward meeting at Shute Middle School. This one is very important because we will be going over the budget. I will be answering your budget questions because I will be absent, unfortunately, on the Saturday hearing. So I want you all to hear directly from me what my thoughts are. But I also still encourage you as well to come on the Saturday meeting. And then actually have some budget memos, but I guess we do that another time. So that's all for me.
Great. Thank you, Alderman Fleming. Alderman Wilson, can you lead us into executive session?
Yes, pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes, ILCS 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding collective bargaining and litigation. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session and are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act. These exceptions are 5 ILCS 120/2A, C2, and C11.
Is there a second? City Clerk, could you take the roll, please?
Alderman Fisk, Alderman Braithwaite, Alderman Nguyen, Alderman Wilson, Alderman Ruth Simmons, Alderman Sufferton, Alderman Ravel, Alderman Rainey, Alderman Fleming.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to recess into executive session on a 9-0 vote. Appreciate everybody for coming out and watching this evening. Thank you.